Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 156. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the Comics Forum, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the Whatnot Segulin. Jim was on vacation in Vegas as I was putting this episode together, so he's not here for the opening right now, but this episode we are going to be chatting with in a very special two-part interview, colorist and friend of the show Art Lyon, to talk about his work on Brave and the Bold issues 20 to 22. The storyline kicked off in issue 19, and he did the color work on 20, 21, and 22, so you're definitely going to want to check out those issues and join us in this particular spoiler-filled segment. We're also joined in a special interview segment with a good friend of the show, Jason Page from the Fanboy Face-Off podcast, who is behind the scenes working on putting together the Denver Comicfest convention, which is going to be April 17th to the 19th. So it's really great because we got a chance to talk with somebody about what it's like to work behind the scenes at putting together a convention. And if you take a look at the Raging Reel on the end, there's two more segments from New York. Both of those were put together by the good sensei himself, so you get some sensei goodness as well on the end of the podcast. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I apologize for the one-day delay. I was planning to have this up Monday night, but I had a problem with the audio on the interview with Art Lyon, where when I got to the end of it and I went to plug it into the episode, it was missing. And I'm not quite sure what I did. And that's just kind of the honest truth of the whole thing. So it's here today, and now I had to redo it right from the original source again. So I'm scratching my head still on what I did. It's probably one of, 5 gazillion things I probably screwed up on. But anyway, here's the show, and we hope you enjoy it. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. We continue to proudly support the Hero Initiative, and if you go to RagingBullets.com, there's a handy-dandy link there to donate. It helps yesterday's creators who really are in need for the financial safety net that the Hero Initiative provides for them. These are the people that laid the foundation work for the characters and the comic creations, and really the template for the work that we're getting today from today's creators. So these are the people that really today need our help and support as a thank you for this wonderful hobby and industry that we are all enjoying right now. So consider please donating to that if you can. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Speaking of Art Lyon, his Brave and the Bold work is collected in this month's solicited paperback, Brave and the Bold Without Sin, written by Marv Wolfman and David Hine, art by Phil Winslade, Doug Braithwaite, and of course colorist Art Lyon, cover by Doug Braithwaite. Don't miss the latest round of DCU team-ups from the Brave and the Bold, issues 17 to 22. Green Lantern's in a tough situation as he finds himself teaming with the Phantom Stranger to aid far-off worlds. Plus, Supergirl and Raven band together to save San Francisco from a new supervillain with deep roots in the DC universe. Regularly $17.99, 40% off only $10.79 to pick up those issues. Art just announced, too, that he's also going to be doing the color work on JSA vs. Cobra, Engines of Faith, which is a 6-issue miniseries, the first issue solicited this month. Special discount, regularly $2.99, 50% off, only $1.49. We'll talk a little bit more about that one at the end of the show, but that should be a gorgeous series. Whatever your shipping preferences, whatever your bag and boarding preferences, DCB Service accommodates your collecting needs. In Stock Trades has Absolute Batman The Long Halloween hardcover, regularly $75, 37% off, only $47.25. We're going to be discussing Long Halloween in 2 weeks. 2 more episodes coming. Regularly $19.95, 37% off, only $12.57 for the trade paperback if you want to go that route as well. They offer free shipping on orders of $50 or more. They have a ton of collected editions in stock and ready to ship right now. Thank you for supporting us, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Our sponsor for this episode is Lords of Justice, the action-packed superhero anthology published by Altered Dimensions, featuring original stories by Michael Boatman, Brian Lee Hitchcock, Robert Orm, and Kevin G. Summers. Lords of Justice is a thrill-packed ride through the world of masks, capes, and high-tech gear that will keep you turning the pages till the end and leave you wanting more.
My name is Jared Weiss. I am the Paladin. You may have read some newspaper stories last year about my war on crime. They're exaggerations, mostly. Apparently a masked vigilante in a Washington, D.C. suburb isn't enough to sell newspapers. Well, let me set the record straight. I don't have superpowers. I can't fly or bend steel with my bare hands or move things with my mind. I'm not the born bored son of a billionaire trying to make some excitement in my life, and I'm not doing this to try to market a new superhero concept to DC Comics. Why am I doing this? Because somebody has to. Because gangs are moving into the suburbs, and the kids are getting hooked on drugs every single day. Because what those kids really need is somebody to look up to. They need a hero, and that's exactly what I want to be.
Whether you're a fan of comics, superheroes, or just action-packed adventure tales, add Lords of Justice to your reading list. Lords of Justice is available from Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and CyberWizardProductions.com. And we'll have direct links to those right on our website, and in the show notes. So definitely check that out.
We are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth in plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Mothman.
We're kicking off the show with a discussion with longtime friend of the show, Art Lyon. There's a funny little bit that I cut off the beginning with our initial discussion. Art was having a little bit of technical difficulty on his end with his headphones, and he was only hearing us in one ear, so he was joking around that it sounded like he had a little Sean and a little Jim in his head. Well, I cut that out because it was before we got into our discussion and everything like that, and we got into some side discussions as well, but it's interesting to note because we actually joke about it later in the podcast, so I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of where the whole joke was and why we were laughing about it as we came on through. But this is a wonderful discussion, so without further ado, I want to get you into listening to Art Lyon. We are going to be joined by our very special guest and longtime friend of the show, Art Lyon. Art, I want to welcome you back to Raging Bullets.
Why, thank you.
And we're going to be talking about issues 20, 21, and 22 that you did on Brave and the Bold. And the writer was David Hine, the penciler was Doug Braithwaite, the inker Bill Reinhold, letterer Rob Lay, colorist was you, of course, the assistant editor was Chris Conroy, and the editor was Joey Cavalieri. Am I pronouncing that right?
I'm not sure. I just call him Joey. So
okay, yeah, absolutely. There you go.
It's always good to be on a first-name basis. So
absolutely.
I would guess that it's pronounced, I'll do this slowly because that's the only way that I can get it right, Cavalieri.
That's what I was thinking, too, from the way it looked like it's spelled.
It's like Lieri, right?
Absolutely.
Cavalieri, yeah. So, but
now, we were talking about this casually before I got started here, but I think it's something that we really should jump into right now. How did you get involved in this project? Because it's the artwork on this, all of you guys, home run.
Thanks. Well, I was working one day and I got a call from Joey Cavalieri, and he just asked, what my schedule was like, and I said, I'm pretty flexible because, when you get a call from an editor at DC or Marvel, you say yes, basically, because it's good work. But I actually had, at the time, I had a few things lined up, and so we talked a little bit about the schedule and when the first issue would be due and the second and the third. And I got back to him, and we worked out a page rate and blah, blah, blah. I talked to Doug once on the phone, like once or twice, and a bunch of times with Bill. But I guess that they had seen my work on JLA number 11 and had me in mind for a while. I'm trying to think what else. It's really neat when you hear that. I guess it was Joey told me that they had asked for me specifically. And when you have a couple artists, an art team like Doug and Bill, when you have an art team like that or an artist like that who's that talented request you, that's a big honor because those guys are really good. I mean, you could easily publish their work uncolored and it would sell because it's really nice looking artwork. I mean, if you want, I could send you guys an example, but you can probably find stuff online. I think Bill Reinhold's got a page on Deviant Art, I think. Yeah,
I'll definitely check that out. I'm right now looking at the first page that you worked on the second part of this, and this stuff looks like a painting. It's absolutely breathtaking. We see one of the Guardians of the universe looking over on and telling the story of this planet that was devastated, setting up this whole concept of the Purge. One of the things that I really particularly enjoyed about this book was it's a science fiction story, but there is a magic element, an intense magic element in this book because of the Phantom Stranger. And I loved that throughout the book, I felt both of those elements in the artwork and in the coloring. It was an interesting marriage of what was going on, because I'm a big fan of both fantasy stories and science fiction, and I really got that kind of, which is interesting because it's such a team-up book. It really felt very much like a Phantom Stranger and a Green Lantern book mixed, and that was the part where, when I'm saying a home run, I really enjoyed that mood and tone throughout this, that I never lost either of those characters throughout this story.
Well, that's interesting because I didn't really. I mean, at the time, I wasn't consciously thinking about that distinction, but I did make a point of handling a Phantom Stranger and his special effects in a specific way, just because he's a magical character, and magical is not even the right word, mystical. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I made all of his special effects yellow, basically, or like an off yellow, a warm white kind of. I mean, I wasn't specifically thinking in terms of science versus magic. I was just trying to make things appropriate, I guess.
Well, it worked for me on that level because it really felt like both characters were very accurately represented for who they are and what their books are as solo characters. And that was the part that really just worked for me and throughout this entire thing. It was.
Oh, that's great.
It really is one of those books that I can't encourage people enough. If you miss this, if you want to see a really good looking set of issues, this arc is definitely just chock full of that. I loved that when you got to see these planets, each planet had its own unique look.
Yeah.
And mood, including the architecture, to the point where the architecture had very different shapes and structures. Like they had their own, you could pick out the architectural influence of each race, which to me was really kind of a staggering part of this piece.
I'm working with really good artists, or say there's a temptation to use the word artist to refer to the penciler or the penciler and inker. I like to think that I'm an artist too, and so I should make the distinction of referring to them as the penciler and inker. But I mean, these are really talented guys. These are guys that know their stuff and know how to make those distinctions.
I'm a big fan of art teams, though, and teams that kind of gel well together, and you just see that. And there really is, I got to say, you work well with these guys, because it really is just a very nice marriage of what you were doing there. Because this really does, like, I guess I'm becoming more because of you. We had David Barron on recently. We've had on Alan Pasalacqua. We've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of colorists. And one of the compliments I've got to give all of you guys in how you've educated me is I've gotten to learn that all of you have very unique approaches. And when you said you're an artist, very much you are. Because I've gotten to learn that I can pick out styles now. We were doing it before when Jim got here. On the covers, they don't have the credits of who did the colors. It was nice to see in these books that it was in the interiors. I was thrilled with that. But I noticed that you did the colors on one of the covers, and I was able to pick that out from looking at it, which was, to me, I'm like, score! I'm getting this! I'm understanding it!
Well, and I put the advantage of being a colorist on the cover is that you're the last person that looks at it, basically. Well, you're the last person that works on the cover. I mean, they obviously just stick the copy onto the words, all that stuff. But as a result, it's my responsibility and my opportunity to put, in this case, Doug's and Bill's and my signatures on the cover. And so I make a point of, obviously, because I spent all that time on it and I worked on it, I put my signature on there. So if you look to grab my copy, but if you look in the lower, I guess, left on my cover, issue 22. Yeah, that's Bill Reinhold, Doug Braithwaite, William Reinhold, and me, Art.
See, now I feel like a total dunce.
No, it's okay.
Right there. No, except, you know what? No, I'll take it back, though. Probably the most sincere compliment I can give you is, you know what, dude? I didn't need to see your signature on this one. I saw that it was your work from the cover. I picked
That's
it up
awesome.
Because I literally looked at the cover first, obviously, when I got the issue, and I'm like, I think Art did the colors on the cover. And I went and looked on the inside because it was credited on the inside as well. And I was like, wow, that's a sincere compliment to you, is that it's honestly one of the first times I've ever been able to do that on a cover. And I think it's just because I've been paying more attention since we've been doing the show to colors and trying to get to understand what colorists bring to the table. And we've been very fortunate that we've had a lot of patient colorists, and you're one of those guys definitely who have educated us. And I'm really, I got to tell you, your work is, I'm picking out your work and stuff because I really like it. So
Yeah.
That's so weird because I don't know if this is just me or if all artists feel this way, but I don't really think of myself as having a style. I don't specifically pursue a style. I just kind of do what looks right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I guess that's my style. It's just, that's the result is my style. I just do whatever seems right. And also I have to add, on this and on any project when I'm working with Gene, this happened a lot, and with Doug and Bill, this happened a lot. A lot of pages, went back and forth. I would email a low-resolution version of a page to Doug and Bill, and they would email it back with, here, do this and try this and see if this helps. Because after a while, I look at a page. Each of these pages takes probably 3 hours. And after that, I'm tired of looking at it, and even if there is something wrong, I can't tell because I've just been staring at it for 3 hours, and I need to hand it off. And I hand it off, and I'll get comments. And especially early on the project, in this case, the first issue we worked on, number 20, the first half dozen pages went back and forth a lot, just because I was trying to get a handle on what they wanted and what I was able to do and how to achieve what they were after. And
how do you achieve that painted look, Art?
Well, in this case, the art, it's a little bit less true as we get towards the end of the third issue, number 22, because there was a bit of a time crunch there. But earlier on, there's a lot of gray tones in the art. And again, if you look at Bill Reinhold's page on DeviantArt, you'll see examples of his stuff after he's inked Doug's pencils. I'm sure there's something there, although I could be wrong. But anyway, there's a lot of like ink washes, which is a lot like what I did with Gene. The art I got from Gene was ink washes, although actually the Justice League issue, I think Gene used markers. Actually, there wasn't much brushwork. It was just a bunch of gray scale markers. But the artwork had a lot of gray tones, and what that does for me is I take the file and I darken it a little bit because that makes the brightest areas even a little bit darker, which means that I can go in Photoshop. I can then there's a couple windows you can open in Photoshop. Actually, there's a bunch to adjust an image. You can adjust the blacks and the whites and the grays, and you can add blues and reds and magentas and all kinds of stuff. There's lots of options. But I mostly use something called color balance, where you can add a whole range of colors to the darkest areas, the midtones, and the brightest areas. And I just go in and do that. And you essentially take grays and make them, add a bit of yellow and some green and a little bit of blue, or that's the initial stage. I kind of do that. And once I get the hang of what, an Owen looks like and what the red of the Owen's robes is, then I record that as an action. Anytime after that I have to color an Owen's robe, I just hit a button and it reproduces that red that I have chosen, which is the red of the Owen's robes, basically.
So to keep the consistency throughout.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Do you darken then? Because I'm looking at the Owens now. We see like the back shot of one of the Owens. We see with the shadows. Mm-hmm. So then do you do the shadow effects then after the fact? Is that after you've colored them, do you add that in? Or is that something that comes from the ink work? How does that work out?
That's in the original art. I mean, anything you see that's black or even close to black was done by the penciler, finalized in the inking stage. Now, I do go in and work in the darker areas with whatever color I've decided works in the shadows. In this case, because they're in a big green space, I used a really dark green color, I think, under the art layer. You can make it so that you can see through the art layer into layers that you add underneath. You can add layers on top of the art and layers underneath. Usually I add special effects like explosions or glows or whatever. I usually add that on top of the artwork in most cases. And usually the shadows or darker colors, after I've done the initial tints, I have a whole layer that's just for shadows, and then a whole layer that's just for highlights. I mean, that changes occasionally depending on the project, but usually I have one layer that's underneath where I lay in a basic color. Because even with the tints on the original art, you don't necessarily get a dark enough color, but I don't want to go back in and make it darker. And so I'll go underneath and add in, in the case of the Owens, I'll choose a blue that I think is a good Owen skin tone, and I'll drop that in a little bit. And then on top of that, but still underneath the original art layer, I'll add in some shading, be highlights or shadows. And then on top of the art layer, I have a layer I'm actually not using this much anymore because I realized there was a flaw in it. But on this project, I had a layer on top, which is where I put a lot of the extreme highlights, the really bright areas. And then on top of that, I have like a special effects layer.
I was wondering something. One of the things I noticed, you had a lot of the sequences where there was like a heavy dominant color, like either the reds or the greens. And then you had other times when it was a mixture where there was no one dominant color. When you're going through this, is it easier or harder to have these sequences where there's the one main dominant color than every offshoot color, or which one's like easier and or less tricky to work with? Or
it's easier, I think, if you have a bunch of different scenes, a bunch of sequences in the book that take place in different places. On these first 4 pages, you've got how many locations you have here. You've got the Owens, you've got this world that's in the process of being destroyed, this world after it's destroyed, and then another world with Hal Jordan's there. And the advantage of that is that because they are specifically very different locations, you kind of have to color them differently. Just because, one's, in the Owen, I don't know what their room is called, their big place, where they all float around and read books. But and the other is an alien world. It's being destroyed, and then afterwards, it's like a post-apocalyptic look, and then we're on another world, and you pretty much have to make those look different. So I went with reds on the alien world that's being destroyed, in part because I knew that the scenes with the Owens were going to be greens. And so I thought, well, what's the opposite of green? Reddish, kind of. And so I said, well, let's and also it helps that red makes sense. If you're having acid rain dropped on you and stuff, red makes sense, I think.
Yeah.
And also the scenes, the color of the acid rain and the highlights in the tornado in that first second panel of that first page, the whatever it is, anyway. And also on pages 2 and 3, when you have that panel going across the top and you see the pools of that acid rain.
Yeah.
I tried to come up with a color that just looked nasty. It looked like acid, and I don't know why, but it just made sense to go.
Well, it looks like it's decaying. It looks like everything is kind of
like you're melting the rock. Actually, even it's there's some really cool where the pools are dropping down and it's forming a pool of this acid, and then but like the rock face above it, it's kind of like you can see it, and it's it definitely looks kind of really not like a pleasant experience.
No, that's These first pages, like I said, went back and forth a lot because this is what happens when you work with really talented artists. They tend to have a very good idea of what they want. And so you go back and forth until you get a handle on what they're expecting. In this case, we did a lot of that. And, like looking back on it, there's probably some stuff I've changed and probably some stuff that they weren't happy with. But we've been working, me and Doug and Bill have been working on stuff now for a few months, and then I think we've gotten a good handle on how we work together as a team. I hope to continue working with them because it's been great.
It was funny as I was looking at these issues. It's this story for anyone who hasn't picked it up yet. It's a story of this little girl who, like the other children that she's with, are a victim of this experimentation that mutates her. And the twist is that Hal and the Phantom Stranger discover that she knows the language of an alien race that was previously assumed by everybody else just to be nonsense talk. This is basically this tale that she tells of the sage and the purge. The sage is the good religious leader trying to guide her people to the way of righteousness from the devastation that befell them. And the purge, on the other hand, felt that they would only find enlightenment through like this genocide, like cleansing. And what we're seeing here with this devastation of this planet that you're talking about right here, especially when you see the mother clutching the child in that acid rain, is the purge. Basically, the purge continuing its quest to kind of wipe out everything, to cleanse the universe, one planet at a time.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I gotta chuckle at the Prudian vomit that becomes like a shell. in there. And
Yeah.
just to show, I take things too far sometimes when I think them through. Because I was thinking of something like, okay, it looks like it's all safe and stuff on the inside, but that's got to be one of the smelliest safety zones ever. I don't know that I would want to be in there.
Well, it's better than the alternative, apparently. So.
Yeah, I guess so. But he doesn't. Even when he comes out, he does not look like that was like the greatest. Is it gone?
The amount of time I spent on that sequence, on the whole, like I said again, these like early pages, the amount of time I spent kind of establishing the colors of things, and I spent way too much time on the panel where he's throwing up this stuff on page 7. Mm-hmm. I just spent a lot of time on that. I'm not sure why. In retrospect, I could have spent a lot less time on it, but this is how one learns, I guess.
Well, I guess that's where the fantasy element came in for me, though, because that creature's definitely very... Yes, it's science fiction, all that, but he's very, like, it came off a little Dark Crystal to me. It came off a little... And I mean that in totally a great way, because that was something that I really enjoyed, was how rich and vibrant these races were, because I haven't seen them before. So I'm like, wow, this is really cool to get this glimpse into this expansive DC universe. It's one of the nice things about Green Lantern stories is you get to experiment with characters like this.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's one of the main things I've always liked about Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps is just. I mean, I guess this is true of any character, but there's no end of stories, and there's not really a lot of characters in the DC universe who you can tell those stories with. There's not a lot of characters who spend a lot of time flying around space, really. I mean, there's Adam Strange, and there's a small batch of them, but it's interesting that one of DC's main mainstays and one of their main characters is a guy that does that. I don't think that that's true at Marvel, really. One
of the things that I liked that you did was between Orlan and Hal, the slight distinction between their color tones.
Yes, thank you for noticing.
I really liked that because it was clear they're part of the Green Lanterns, they're part of the same universe, but there was a little bit of a customization in Orlan. I really liked that, especially because with everything that starts going on, we see a lot of Green Lantern action with these two, and it was really clear to pick out both of them right away. But Orlan especially is such a critical part of this to set up what eventually happens to Hal, that it's really important to follow what's going on with Orlan and start to pick up the twists and turns that are going on when he starts getting possessed by the Purge.
Yeah, I'm glad that you noticed that. That's, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a conceit on my part, but I like to make a distinction. I mean, you can argue, yes, that all the Green Lanterns' costumes should be the same green, but at the same time, they're individuals and they're from lots of different worlds. Maybe they don't see green the same way. Maybe what looks like a bluish green to me and you looks like black to them. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like, I mean, obviously you can go either way with it. I have no problem with anyone who wants to make their costumes the same green and the same blackish color. But I don't know. It's just a thing I do, I guess. I do the same thing with skin tones too. I try not to give any of the main characters the same skin tone.
And I do appreciate that because I like the visual distinction. It's something that clearly when you see them, it's what character you're dealing with. Whether it's a close-up shot or it's a distance shot, it's really important for me to be able to pick out right away who the players are on the screen, especially when there's intense action, because this has a lot going on in it. And there's some pages where, like I said, there's great close-up shots, but there's other pages where it's vast, wide-open spaces with a lot of characters, a lot of aliens, a lot of action, especially when we're exploring Chimera, Orlan's world, and we start to learn about their their economy off of these dream creatures and all that. It's really easy to get lost in that and not be able to pick out who everybody is, and it really is. When you think about it, the Green Lanterns, it's all willpower generated. Their costumes, and we see customization from the Green Lanterns in slight little tweaks into their masks, into
even among the Earthbound Green Lanterns, each one has its own distinction, its own even color, and just it's not all the same. So I like that, seeing the two differences, especially we got two different we have two completely different races. They should look at their uniforms differently.
Well, and when you think about
that makes sense to me. Yeah.
And when you think about it, their uniforms have adjusted and changed over times. Like Jon Stewart right now is not wearing the same uniform. Hal, for example, his uniform has been tweaked since he was originally around. It's there's a slightly different look to it. So I actually I liked the distinction. It was just something that I thought was worth noting. It's not a little thing, but it was cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I that's the kind of thing I make a point of. I'm working on a Wolverine comic book right now, and you've got it's got Wolverine in it, and Cyclops, and Colossus, and Armor, and Cannonball, and I don't think any of those characters should have the same skin tones. It doesn't make sense. Wolverine's Wolverine. He should not have the same skin tone as Cyclops.
Well, they all have different origin backgrounds as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Colossus, who's Russian. I gave him I made his skin a little more fair. This is a DC podcast, not a Marvel podcast.
Well, no, it's okay because we can still talk about where your work that's coming up because I'm definitely going to be checking out. So you're doing a run on Wolverine Origins, right?
Yeah. I was trying to remember here. We were talking earlier about what issues it's going to be, and I was trying to remember because it changed. It was one thing, and then it kind of changed all of a sudden.
But you're definitely on Wolverine Origins 34?
Yes, number 34. I'm still a little confused what the next issue we're working on is. It's kind of up in the air. It looks like I may be doing 34, 35, and 36, and then 41 after that. I'm not sure. Yeah, it looks like we're doing 34, 35, and 36, and then there's another arc in between there, and then we're working on number 41.
Very cool.
Which is nice because it will give us a breather. I just finished up issue number 34 on Friday. Thursday night, I got an hour and a half of sleep.
Oh, jeez.
It was not fun. And I still wasn't done until like 1:30 in the afternoon. So I slept a lot that night.
I'm sure.
Yeah. This is a thing I want to stress too with on the one hand this will sound like I'm bragging or something, but making a comic book is a heck of a lot of work. It really is. There's an awful lot of work that goes in, and if a comic book is late or if every page or panel isn't brilliant, try to give us a break, a little slack, because it's just not every page isn't going to be a winner,
Actually, it's one of the things I've come to appreciate. It's one of the things I'm glad about the fact that Jim and I do this, is we have the opportunity to talk to creators and get an idea that just at every stage of development of an issue, I mean, these are books that come out monthly, or like you said, I mean, even if it slips a little bit, you're still talking about a book that, you're trying to get in a very short time span. Considering the sheer amount of people, if you take a look at those cover credits, there's a lot of people involved in the creation of a book to get it in a month. And this is why I would never want to be an editor. That's got to be a really stressful job. I mean, my job is stressful enough, as a deadline approaches. But man, to be the guy in charge of making all that happen. I'm looking at these pages with the Purge where we get to now those background visual effects with those blues and just the glowing coming off him and all that.
Oh yeah. Oh, God, that page.
I bring you peace, I bring you harmony. That's got to take a decent amount of time to pull that together.
Yes, it did. And that's a page that went back and forth. The page 6, I guess? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a page that went back and forth a lot because that's the first time that I colored that character and his special effects. And so that went back and forth a lot. And still not completely happy with it, but I'm basically happy with it. The script called for like a black light effect. And I think I achieved that pretty well in terms of the colors. Not completely happy with the special effect. I think I could have made it a little more three-dimensional, but at some point you just have to stop working and move on. It's literally like it's an art and it's a job too. And so at some point I just okay, I've spent enough time on this. I've got to stop. I would love to spend more time and make it amazing, but
Well, you've got, going back to what you said, you've got a deadline, so you've got to make it as perfect as you can, and then you've got to move on because you've got to get to the other pages. I liked this shot and this sequence particularly because we got to know him in the visual aspect and the dialogue aspect of how he's like. It's funny. It's like he's almost shocked that they don't see that he's bringing them peace and love.
Right.
By destroying them all. Like he's got this, this thing in mind that like this is what you need, and nobody's getting it.
No, come on, guys, work with me. Well, I've said this before. All great villains think that they're the hero.
Yeah, absolutely.
They think that they're doing the right thing, and then when well, I didn't want to ruin the way the story ends and talk about it then.
Time I got to ask you a question. Sean asked the question before I can say it. I'm like, damn it, that was mine. I was going to ask him that.
You got to be faster, man.
That's because I got a little Jim in my ear. He's faster than you.
He's so spry.
Yeah.
He's so lively and quick.
Again, one of the things I really liked was the personality of each world. When we get to Orlan's home pod area, this is even on the same planet, but again, there's a very similar to cities on our Earth. The cities are going to have their own distinct flavor, their own distinct look, and this very much fits him. Like when he goes flying in, I'm like, okay, this fits his personality, his whole look. But the architecture, again, was a really welcome change. It was cool to see that distinction throughout the whole thing, including the vegetation. When we take a look at the vegetation over there, it was the whole art for this whole thing. This is just a very pleasing book for me to look at and just to kind of page through and enjoy the interior sequences. I appreciated the change in shading and tones when we get to meet Orlan's wife. For the first time, it's kind of a calming, where there's been so much going on and so much heaviness. It was kind of a calm sequence for me.
I was going to say, with the wife there, it was something that really impressed me. Is like, I'm noticing like the layering of colors on colors, kind of, not just one straight color, a little bit the same shade, and, kind of like I want to say like an inking effect where it's accenting the facial features, but it's not using the black ink, but using the different color tones. And with her, especially when, she first comes in, you get a couple of the close-ups of her later on. You just it was something that really like impressed me. Just seeing like, man, that is just a cool effect. Now, how much of that type of sequencing is their actual inking, and how much of it is you, or how does that type of? That was the thing I was kind of wondering.
Well, that's all me, baby.
That's all you.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Jim. If you look at your hand, if you hold your hand out in front of you, it's not just one color. There's a lot of colors in your skin. There's, depending on, of course, on the kind of light. But, in a bright, like a daylight, you'll see blues and greens and, some purples and a little bit of like off-whites and pink and orange and red and stuff. And so when I do a close-up, on page 9 here, the close-ups of Orlan's wife, I try to put those colors into the skin. If you have a close-up of a face or a hand or whatever, to work in those kinds of colors. Now, of course, we're talking about aliens here, and so I don't know really what color their blood is. They have bluish, like a bluish skin, but I just kind of assume they have like basically reddish blood, because that's going to affect the blush color that you use. I basically have 3 colors I use on skin tones. The basic skin tone, in this case, that's like a light blue. And then I have a blush color, which is like a rosy color, a purplish color. And then like a light green, a really light green. The light green I use in areas where there's a bone that's really tight up against the skin, like the corners of the jaw, the bridge of the nose, the forehead, and like knuckles. That kind of thing. I put a little bit of that in there. A lot of times it might not be real obvious, but it really shouldn't be. If it stands out, then it looks weird. But I think it helps create realistic skin tones. I put a blush around the lips and the cheeks and around the eyes, and I put a purple around the eyes. If you look in the mirror and look at your own eyes, around your eyes, you'll find a purplish color usually. And so, that's a thing I do. There's that, and I also play around with reflected color. On the close-ups of her on page 9, she's like leaning up against some kind of a glass-like sculpture or a plant organic sculpture thing, and I made that like it's kind of a yellowish green, And so I used a little bit of that color reflected on her skin. And I tried to do that as much as I can. It's the kind of thing that goes by the wayside if I'm in a hurry. But if I can, I do a lot with reflected color. I think that helps to create a sense of environment and of real objects. And because in the real world, you get tons of reflected color. If you hold like a red card or like a red piece of paper up against your skin, you're going to get reflected red light off of that on your skin. And
I like when we see her up close, like you're mentioning. Those two panels, there's slight variations in the skin tone based on the fact that we're seeing her from a different angle. And I appreciated that tiny detail that you threw in as well. That added a little element to me. It's very subtle, but it really worked for me, and I geek out at those details now. I go back through now and I check out my issues, and I do this with almost every comic that I read now, where I'll go back through and look at it. After I read the story, I'll go back through and I'll look at it 2 or 3 times to take a look at just the artwork and try to pick up the subtle little touches like that. And that was
God bless you.
Well, no, but I mean, it's really, when you look at the cost of comics nowadays, I get a lot of little details like that, and this is a compliment to you. It makes it worth it to me to go back and do that, because I really get to appreciate the attention to detail that you put into the artwork like that, and the whole art team. This just really worked really well for me, because this is a dream world where everything's generated by dreams. Her sculptures come out of these organic sculptures that they're a mixture of minerals and plants, and they come out of, they're part of her dreams, and she thinks about these things, and they change on a daily basis. And I love this just whole rich kind of environment. But like I said, it's 2 little panels, and it's funny, those close-up shots. It was something I noticed almost immediately, was just the slight skin tone variation, because we were seeing her in one straight on, and the other from the side, and you would, in reality, like you're mentioning, you would see subtle differences because the light sourcing would be different at that point. I appreciate those details.
Thank you. I'm glad you do. Usually in a scene, I have 3 basic colors, which I call scene colors, and there's like a basic scene color. In this case, it was like a medium warmish green. Not like a yellow green, but on the warm side. And then I'll have a shadow color. In this case, it was a cold, dark green. And I chose a cold, dark green because I wanted to, in the hopes it would help to sort of suggest a coldness or a scariness or a mysteriousness in the environment. And then I'll have a highlight color. In this case, it was like a light green. And I pretty much do that in any major scene or any sequence. Is have those 3 colors, and the main color. In this case, it was a warmish green. I put a little bit of that into everything, and so the skin tone, of the Phantom Stranger here, and the color of his clothes isn't what it would look like if he was out in the broad daylight, under our sun. It's a little bit more greenish, just a tad greenish. I think that helps, too, to place characters in an environment.
It was funny when you were talking about how there's like a sense of foreboding and all that as it comes through. It was interesting. When I first got into the house, typically when you go to a character's wife's house, right in the beginning, I was like comforted. I'm like, okay, we're inside the guy's home and all that. It was gradually, as these scenes started continuing, I started getting this sense of, something's going to happen here. I don't know what it is yet. But I'm like, something is up. And it was really the next page when we start seeing the thing behind the Phantom Stranger. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what is going on here? And, he's talking about that I doubt the Bellamort would affect me. And all of a sudden, this thing slams into the back of him. Now, the Phantom Stranger is like this really powerful, mystical being that, like, you don't really see the Phantom Stranger ever in like any sort of trouble.
Right.
Yeah. He's usually like an observer. I don't want to compare him necessarily to the Watcher in the Marvel universe, because he's not on that kind of power level, but he's there. The comparison does work to a certain extent, in the sense that they're usually characters that you see outside of the main events. They're more observers. They're more, they will, in the Phantom Stranger's case, he'll put his 2 cents worth in. Sometimes he's guiding people, but you rarely see him in the mists of danger. That really added to the power of this segment, the slow build to this. because you see him overtaken by this thing. It was funny when you were talking before about, we didn't get to see what color blood she had. It's all because this guy was napping. If he wasn't napping, we would have seen.
He's you can credit David Hine with that. I mean, it's interesting that you point that out about the Phantom Stranger. That hadn't occurred to me, but you're right. The majority of Phantom Stranger stories I haven't read, but my impression is the same. And David Hine actually, he uses him here as another character, basically, as opposed to just this mysterious guy.
Well, and I liked it, too, because he was so surprised by it. Because I'm not saying you've never seen the Phantom Stranger in trouble before. I don't mean it that way. But he's one of those characters that you don't expect to. It's just not his role usually in a story to be in this particular place. And I do like even that Marika, who at first, because my first thinking as I was reading this, I'm like, is she doing something to him? Is she a bad guy? But really, it's not that at all. It's their economy. People come there to get these dreams. It's kind of a rehabilitation, an escape, whatever from life in general to go to this place. It's kind of a pleasure palace or something like that. Just in the sense that you would leave there. It's a spa world almost. You would come here to it seems like to get refreshed and go away. And it was an interesting little twist that this had such a negative effect on him. But also that negative effect, what she was doing in her own way to probably ease his pain, or what she conceived to be that,
right,
ultimately caused her death.
Whoops.
Yeah.
I'm reminded, Jim, you were talking earlier about, I guess we were all talking about the different kinds of colors in different sequences. And in this, the interior of their house here, of Orland's house, as we were talking about this, I remembered that I colored this sequence a little differently. All the scenes that take place in the house, I used different layers when I colored. I can't remember exactly how. I'd have to open up the actual documents, but I changed the order of the layers, and the idea was to give it a different kind of a look, because it is all, a sort of, the impression I got in the script and also specifically in the art is that it's organic but also has a glass-like quality to it. And so I kind of rearranged my layers and I colored it a little differently because I wanted the walls and the sculptures and all that to have a different look to them. Beautiful,
the way that this all came out. I love that we get this glass shot of this Bellamort.
Yeah.
Looking like,
yep.
It's almost like the thing's coming at us.
It's coming at you, man. It all goes black after that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the face huggers.
Alien face huggers are very popular. So this is a page 11 where it's another example of skin tones after the Phantom Stranger is affected by the slug face hugger thing, the neck hugger. I made his skin more pale, which I think makes sense. It's, the impression of your blood running cold, kind of.
And almost, it really fit what was happening to him internally, because he was, ready to give it all up.
Right.
At that sequence. So I really liked that attention to what was... It actually worked really well for where this story was going with him, because he almost didn't come back.
Nope. Oh, and, I'm noticing, too, in... the first panel on this page, on page 11, is an example. I'm not sure if I did a bunch of it here, but all these scenes inside their house, I did a lot of that reflected color thing, because obviously everything is made out of kind of a shiny material, and so it made sense to do a lot of reflected color. There's probably a lot of places where I didn't do it, but I tried to do that a lot. I used, again, in the first panel, page 11, there's a reflection of the color of her clothes in the floor. I tried to use reflections of his blues in the floor under him, that kind of thing.
The sculptures, you see it in the background too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Thanks, man.
It's interesting that we do this shift to the forests of Bellamort, which again you're talking about difference of skin tones. Hal, very full of life, very rich skin tone at this point. Which was a nice contrast to where we left the stranger at.
Well, and you've also got a bunch of greens because it's a forest. I tried to make it look a bit on the yellowish side, but it's at night, so I had to make it also kind of cool. So really looks more bluish. But you've got Green Lantern, who has a green costume, in a green forest, and so I had to make the skin tones stand out. That's always kind of a challenge when you've got, a guy whose costume is green, and in this case, I chose to, in general, make Hal's green color be a little on the cold side. Not that he's, a cold character, but I wanted the green of Orlan to be more yellowish because that was the color I was going to use on his world. Actually, no, it went the other way around. I made his green a different green than Hal's because I wanted to make that distinction. And then when we got to the scenes on his world, I said, oh, well, I'll just make the greens here more yellowish because I've already done that with his green in his costume, and it kind of makes sense. The world that he's from has a lot of greens that aren't really cold greens. He has lots of warm greens, and so the green he uses in his costume is a little more warm.
Talking about scenes of mood, there's a couple times during the issue. There's this one with Hal where there's a really close up of the eyes, and there's one much later in one of the later issues, and when we get to it, I'll note it with the Phantom Stranger. When Hal was possessed, he did a similar look back where it was like that. Where visually, to me, it set so much of a mood of surprise, or in the Phantom Stranger one I'm talking about, it wasn't surprise. It was more so that he was in the know. He was being a little sly. The visual tone and mood, I just want to compliment that because it was really important in this sequence that it set. It was something I just happened to notice when I was doing everything. I'm like, wow, really a nice little element of surprise was set in the tone of this particular facial close-up of his eyes that really just worked for me.
I think a lot of that, too, is in the art. If you look at how it's been rendered, again, I've used the word art, in the inks and pencils, it's been rendered with like those blur lines kind of, on the edges of the panel. I think that helps a lot to create a sense that he's maybe turning his head or a sense that something's about to happen.
Now, as a colorist, when you're working on that, how hard is it to, maintain, because when those type of things are happening, I'm sure there's a danger of losing that when you're doing the coloring. How do you because really this, like I said, it's visually it's a very striking moment. It felt especially because it's so close up to him. There's certain times where I'll look at something and I'll be like, that almost is borderline photographic. And this is one of those segments where looking up on him, you don't all, it's very rare in comics that you'll pull off something where I'm like, Hal looks really real there in that moment. This really worked for me.
Hopefully that's an example of, obviously, again, working with a great penciler and a great inker. But in terms of my work, another example of, using those multiple skin tones, that always helps to make things look more alive. And also, I'll use a little bit of, I can't tell if I used it here because I don't have the actual issue. I'm looking at my files and I can't really zoom in on it right now. If I wanted to open up the full-size files, I could, but I might do that here. After I put all the skin tones in his skin areas, I'll put a little bit of the green from his mask in the areas of his skin that are right up against the mask, and vice versa. I'll put a little bit of the skin tone in the edges of his mask. Again, because I think that helps make things look like they're right next to each other, especially when you have warm skin tones and then a coldish green. You have to do something, or at least this is a problem I saw a lot, and I was trying to figure out ways of remedying this. I think later in the issues I warmed up the green in his costume just a little bit in an attempt to offset this. But you've got the warm skin tones and a coldish green, and if you don't find a way to make them mesh a little bit, I think it looks weird. And so I tried to do everything I could to make those mesh a little bit more.
One of the things I appreciate about the artwork, speaking about the greens in his mask, this was something that I noticed, and I want to note here. I liked that the mask looked like you could peel it off. It has a layered effect to it, the way that it was constructed, that it looks like it's a little three-dimensional. Like you can see it off the skin a bit. It's a tiny little thing that I just particularly thought was cool in this one because you want, again, adding that little reality effect to it. It still looked like the classic iconic Hal, but it really did look like that mask was on his face, and I'm like, well, I like that little detail. It looked just little subtle strokes on it that made it look like you could peel that mask off his face.
Well, that's one of the things that's great about comics is that how long has Hal Jordan been around? Since the late 50s, right? How many artists have worked on his comics? You've got all of these different interpretations, and it's just great because everybody adds something and everybody builds on stuff that came before and also adds in new stuff. And this is, you bring up the issue of the costume. This is a problem I always had when I was drawing comics or just drawing stuff on my own, drawing superheroes. Is what are those costumes really? Like, what are they made of?
Yeah.
If you look at Alex Ross's stuff, he pretty much renders it as if it's made out of a material that's not unlike what Adam West wears, on the Batman show. Some kind of spandex or whatever. It has wrinkles and edges and seams and stuff. Or is it just this like amazing stuff that's as tight as your own skin? I don't know how to resolve that. And I think that these guys, Doug and Bill, do a good job of, they generally make it skin tight, but also they add creases and little edges where it makes sense.
It's one of the things that I like that Marvel did. There was a lot of storytelling where in Marvel characters it's been explained that a lot of them get their costume from Reed Richards' Are Us. Because he had to create those costumes for the Fantastic Four. So naturally, why wouldn't you go to him if you're having? Because he created such wide variations of costumes for the four of them that naturally that same science would then easily be applied to other heroes. So it was. I always liked that little universe twist that Marvel did with why wouldn't you take advantage of having that character in your universe?
Yep, yeah, why not? And I'm sure that Reed makes a pretty penny off of that. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, you got to afford that Baxter building somehow.
That's right. God bless those unstable molecules.
See, with the different superhero uniforms, I always just considered it what not wear.
What not wear? Very nice. You should start a line, Jim. It's what not wear. If there isn't a line of what not wear already, you should start one.
Every time you say stuff like that, I'm going to smack the little Jim in my ear.
I'm going to keep saying it just to see you hit yourself in the head multiple times. Here, let me hand you the mace. You can use that.
Well, your little friend's going to be punished for your little jokes. So it's
as long as it's a little friend and not me, I'm happy. Smack the little sucker around. Have fun.
Won't you be shocked when you find out he's a voodoo doll?
Ow! What the heck, man?
Voodoo doll.
It is interesting though, because besides the costume, besides the mask, you do see it in the costume as well, where you see little folds in the material and things. I liked it. It's just little tiny details that I thought were interesting as he was continuing this exploration of these creatures to try and figure out what's wrong. I liked that this whole sequence was filled with, while there was a sense of wonder at the outdoor environment, there was also a sense of foreboding in it as well, and that was an interesting balance for me because it really was like a wonderful place that I would want to see come to life in like a fantasy film or an animated film. Yeah, because I'm a big fan of that, but it never lost that mystery aspect of it as well.
Well, Doug Braithwaite seems to be a big fan of ground fog or like ground mist because I find myself rendering it. He draws it in. And Bill inks it, and then I go over the artwork on the special effects layer, which is on top of the original art, and I'll kind of brush in a little bit of this misty color. In this case, it's like a moon color, basically, to make it look more realistic, I guess, more like a mist. As soon as you put a color on top of the blacks, of course, you make the blacks less black, and so it looks more misty, I guess.
What really worked is the action and the visuals in the art sequence matched with his dialogue. He's having this whole discussion with the Ring.
Right.
Because the Ring is saying that these creatures are lethal and that they're supposed to, and Hal's like, but they're supposed to be harmless. I liked the dialogue with the Ring, giving the Ring a little bit more life. It'd be the same way, people would talk to, a computer program that was talking to you or something like that. Yeah. That had life to it. And obviously these rings are far more advanced than, our equipment would be today. So that's one of the little twists like that I really enjoy.
Well, you have to figure, they're flying around in space by themselves all the time. They probably get lonely. the Green Lanterns. So it's good that their rings can talk to them.
I gotta wonder if Hal's wait.
He starts calling his ring Wilson. You know?
Wilson. I want a first Green Lantern story I ever read. I don't have the issue, but it was the early 70s, I guess, and it was drawn by Neil Adams. Oh, yeah. It was Neil Adams or Mike Grell. I think it was Mike Grell, who at that stage was heavily Neil Adams influenced. Mm-hmm. And on page 8, which is when Hal and Orlin arrive at Orlin's house, the pose that Hal is in there flying in is totally a Neil Adams pose. It just looks like it's like right out of a Neil Adams or a Mike Grell Green Lantern comic.
Yeah, it's definitely got that class, that style to it.
Yeah, the foreshortening and just the arc of the body and the feet. I don't know, there's something about it. The way it's rendered, the blacks, it just reminded me a lot of that.
He did a lot with Batman, too. When Neil Adams did his Batman run, it was very similar. I always liked that because Batman was always in these like amazingly what looked like athletic poses.
Mm-hmm.
That
Neil Adams changed comics radically, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is. You're right. I liked how that was used as a panel frame.
Yeah, that's clever artists.
Yeah, that I geeked out as a kid growing up. Reading comics that were drawn that way. And I love seeing that. It's just little tricks that make one page. Like I said, that's why I like going back and looking at a book a couple of times after I've read it, because it's fun to just kind of bask in those details. And I do encourage anybody who's listening right now, if you don't do that, do yourself a favor and, after you read your comics, go back through and just page through them a couple of times and just kind of enjoy the art and just, enjoy that ride kind of going through, look at the tiny details, pay attention to the backgrounds, pay attention to the foregrounds, and really just kind of look at what's going on. Because when you're doing your first read through of a story, especially when you're paying attention to the dialogue too, it's hard to catch every little detail. And it's really fun to go back through and do this. I found that my enjoyment of comics has just increased so much more when I go back through and I see the work that really everybody's done in the book. Mm-hmm. And it's a rich experience when you do that.
If you're going to spend the money, you have to work and earn money and then go and spend time to go to the comic book store and spend the money, spend time coming home, spend time reading it. You might as well read it twice, Yeah.
And it really is, especially if you enjoyed the book the first time through, to go back through and kind of experience it again and see it like kind of at a different level, it's really well worth it. So it's one of the reasons why right now I'm enjoying just talking so much about this art, because it really was a very rich experience. It took me to just a completely different place.
Well, you were talking about the layout of this page 8. This is how artists, again, I'm using that term to describe a penciler. The penciler is an artist, but not the artist. I'm going to keep making that. But this is how a penciler keeps themselves entertained. Because I like that Doug, on the previous page 7, it's all squarish panels, rectangular panels. And then he has this page, which is, uses Hal as a border kind of, and then you've got a bunch of panels at an angle kind of, and then at the bottom, another standard widescreen or rectangular panel. And then the next page is the rectangular. Then the next page, we got angles again. And this is just one of the ways I think that artists keep themselves entertained by making things different and doing something different and just trying to figure out a way of making it interesting and dramatic and emotive,
It is very cinematic because it does in its own way. It builds just a mood and a tone. Is it fun for you then, as a colorist, then when you get these pages to come in and see these kind of changes to each page and like, ooh, this is kind of an interesting thing to work on right now and kind of play around with this? Is that fun for you?
It is if I don't have to do the flats. That's why I use a flatter because not all the time, but. A lot of times I'll use a flatter because it just saves time. And on a DC or a Marvel book, I make enough that I can afford a flatter. But yeah, I mean, you use these kind of angles to enhance things, make things interesting.
If you're able to have a flatter work on it, so that way you can get into the fun bits of doing the color work.
Yeah, basically. Flatting a page, if I flat a page myself, it can take anywhere from, at the very least, it will take 20 minutes. It might take as much as an hour if it's, a really detailed page. And in the case of this kind of art, I'm not really using the colors in the flats at all. And so I might as well have somebody else flat it, because it doesn't matter what the colors are. If I need to have the colors be really specific, I might flat it myself. Because otherwise, if you're using the actual colors in the flats, you get your flats from your flatter, and they're not going to be the exact colors you want. You're going to have to change them all anyway. And that's fine. I mean, it's not a colorist's job to choose those colors. But if I'm going to have to change them all anyway, that's going to take me 15 or 20 minutes anyway. And so at that stage, I might flat the pages myself. But because in this style of art where there's a lot of tones I'm working with, gray tones, I'm doing a lot with tints and shading, the flats, are not going to be seen. The colors aren't going to be used. And so I had a flatter on this. So, yeah.
The Purge is not a nice dude.
No, he is not. He's got a complex of some kind.
Because really, this guy reminds me of this creature, the Prudian. Reminds me a lot of a Muppet. And
yeah, he's very Muppet-like, yes.
Yeah. What kind of person do you got to be as the Purge to say, okay, I got everybody but the Muppet, so I'm going to come back and I got to go back and get him.
There's one guy left, didn't make it. Yeah, he seems to be a completist, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He wants to complete a collection,
Yeah. So he goes back after Miss Piggy and Grover's love child, and
God, yeah, he is quite a concoction. That's what to say.
And
I'm assuming Doug Braithwaite made that up. It's
I love it. I mean, I love alien races. I mean, to me, that's part of the great thing about comics is you don't always get to see these creatures like this in film because it really is hard to produce and put together. And in comics, because of the fact that it's the imagination of the art team to kind of go and have fun with this, you get such magical, wonderful characters like this. Especially, this guy with his vomit fest.
Oh, yeah, vomit fest.
And he thought he was safe this time, and I love that the Purge said, you're done, dude, and I'm going to blow you up.
Yeah. There's an old saying, I don't remember who said this, I remember reading this in an interview somewhere, but the great thing about comics is that they have an unlimited special effects budget. Mm-hmm. You just make stuff up, and keep making it up.
But the intensity of seeing that poke its way through his shell, that the Purge had adapted. So it just goes to show that he went through it the first time only because he had overlooked the creature. He had kind of done a widespread genocide of wiping out everybody. But now that he can target this creature, he's going to specifically go. That just shows how relentless the Purge is. Mm-hmm. He went to the point where he found a way through this and went for the dude's eyeball and got in that way and blew him up from the inside out. And we do know what color his blood is.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good point. Well, I figure he's got pink skin. He's probably got red blood,
Oh, yeah.
But this page was really hard because I had to figure out, how to, in terms of color and highlights and reflections, how to represent this goop that this guy encases himself in, and then to sort of render, in terms of color, this stuff breaking through and crawling around and then blowing him up.
One thing I really like too is that the Purge overtook everything. We had a very different color scheme. At first, we had the greens of the inside of this medical center, but then when the Purge came in, the lighting off the Purge, it was that original effect we were introduced to with the Purge, now has overtaken this room. And everything's got, the Purge has overwhelmed everything. It added a sense to me of that this creature was trapped now with the Purge. And I kept hoping for Super Grover to come in, but
with his helmet and his cape.
Yeah.
Well, we all know people who have a way of filling up a room, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, this is little Jim doesn't, but
Yeah.
but again,
I just had a panic attack. I went to the next page 16, and in my file there's a blank panel there.
Oh,
which,
jeez.
which and I went, gah, because I haven't actually, I don't actually have a copy of this issue, and so I know that there is some graphics in there or some type.
Well, see, now Art, I'm looking at my book and I don't see anything. So what was supposed to be there? But but we and on the next page we're flashing back to the girl, and that's where we got this "it hurts" sequence that's going on. You see that internally she's connecting with the deaths that are going on around her. Which this was my first clue that she was in some way connected to the Purge on some level, and I really liked that. But how cold can you be that you're a doctor looking at this? Can we disconnect that monitor? It's upsetting everybody. This poor girl couldn't communicate for 12 years, but let's turn her off.
Yeah. It's bugging me.
Yeah.
You know, every so often you want to find a mute button on somebody, and this one's got a mute button, so let's take advantage of it.
Well, I've got one right here, actually, Jim. So.
See, Jim was hoping that our mixer was a little closer to him so he could do that. It's close. It's right by me.
You have the master switch.
Well, Jim doesn't realize yet that I actually edit in another guy that takes his place. So it's Jim talks and talks and talks, but he never actually makes it on the episodes.
Would he be called the not whatnot?
Yeah. Well, there's another guy named Ted who I bring in. He does all of Jim's voice work.
Jim's voice work, like Jim's a cartoon, which I suspected all along. But, God, let's pick on Jim.
Hey, come on. Yeah, I'm welcome. Yeah.
Well, here
that's
I use my
so endearing.
Go ahead.
No, I said that's why he's so endearing.
He's so endearing.
Yeah, I'm used to the abuse. I'm used to it.
Get used to the abuse.
I liked the switch in the tone here, though, Art, because I
was just going to say I use my standard hospital colors here. It's like a boring drab, off tan color and a really boring blue.
I loved it because it was a hospital sequence, and it really changed the complete mood and tone from where we were at with these intensely bright visual areas in there. And I'm like, all of a sudden, wait a minute, we're in this, which fit her too, because we see this girl's basically, in this horrible state.
Mm-hmm.
And the drab mood of everything surrounding her added to her situation, and also added to this is just not a pleasant place on any level. Like, you would not want to be hanging out here.
It's a hospital. We've all spent time in hospitals, and they're not pleasant places. And so I just tried to choose colors that are just sort of drab and makes you want to get back to something more interesting. Which was really
important too, because of the fact that these kids had been experimented on, and it was that change, that drastic change there, really was important to me, mood and tone wise, with the story, because of how focal this particular child of Korra was to that story.
Right.
It was a good commenting on how much I just really enjoyed the choice. But then through the phone conversations, again, we're getting this whole sense of this larger group of people that are, there's certain things in comics, there's things that Dr. Doom wouldn't even do, and Lex Luthor wouldn't cross the line of doing. These are talking about two big iconic villains from both companies, Luthor and Doom. They wouldn't cross this line. These guys are talking about and it's clear that these kids mean nothing, to the point where when we do see later that they're willing to off them if it becomes an inconvenience or a potential that it would fall back on them.
That's an interesting observation about the supervillains versus these ruthless businessmen. The advantage of a supervillain is that you can play on that larger stage, and I don't know if you guys have ever played Dungeons and Dragons, but in Dungeons and Dragons, they have these things called alignments, in earlier versions they had alignments, but a lot of supervillains in comic books are lawful evil, which means they're bad. They do lots of bad things, but they have rules and they have a code and they have standards. I mean, there are certainly exceptions. The Joker is not lawful evil. I don't think, anyway. But Dr. Doom is totally chaotic. Lawful evil.
Yeah, he's chaotic evil.
Yeah.
Right. But Dr. Doom is totally lawful evil. You can trust him. You know? You can trust Doom. If he says, I won't kill you, he's not going to kill you. Now, he might have his Doom bots do it, maybe. No, Doom wouldn't do that. But anyway.
Luthor has that same thing to him, though. And there's a lot of times where Luthor believes that he's doing things for the greater good of humanity.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's the great thing about the modern Lex, is that he sees himself as the hero who's protecting humanity from the alien, basically.
I liked when we flash back to the world again when Hal shows up. Mm-hmm. That shot of the Phantom Stranger again, it was... The close-up of him and the stuff like going on right by his mouth, it was clear that like this guy is in a deep sleep, a deep sleep to the point where you're not going to shake this guy awake. It's got to come from the inside.
Yeah, I tried to use in his skin tone here. I tried to, I didn't want to go with the like right after he gets attacked. I used that pale color, almost a bluish color. But here he's not in a state of shock anymore. He's just in this incredibly deep sleep. But I didn't want to make it really warm, and so I used more reds, but I made them colder reds, like more magenta-ish reds. That's just a thing you can do to make reds cold. They don't have to be reds don't have to be warm.
Marika, if you want to talk about gruesome.
Look, yeah, that's
when Hal turns around.
Oh, this sequence was hard.
Yeah. Because Hal's turning the chair, and I really liked the way this built because it was a very Hitchcock kind of build where it's like slowly turning the chair around, and boy, except unlike Hitchcock, there was no like off camera or anything like that. It's right in your face, like, and I liked that Hal right away. His first assumption was that she died by these Bellamort creatures. Mm-hmm. But it was the ring that ended up telling her, as we see this slow drop in the ring's power, that it was something else.
Mm-hmm. I think interesting. You mentioned the Hitchcock thing. You're right. There's this 1, 2, 3 thing. There's the first panel, second panel, and the third panel has the reveal, and then the fourth panel is like it's like a little story, basically. You've got 4 acts, the introduction, the rising action, and then the climax, and then the, the denouement.
I liked the clues as we're looking down the hallway with Hal to the blue all the way in the distance. It's a slight little clue that his power source is being drained. It's something to do with the Purge. Also a clue as to what the Purge has done. Because as we're getting closer and closer to it, you start to see more of those blue tones. And then when you see it surrounding the lantern, it's right away, wait a minute, he's got Orlan.
That's a problem.
Yeah, but I liked that we knew it through clues being delivered before in the artwork. Mm-hmm. That was a nice touch for me to see like the blue color surrounding the lantern, and then I'm like, oh, where's Orlan? And I'm like, don't even tell me that's what's going on here. And that's
great. That worked. I tried to make a light the special effects from Hal's ring be like a warmish green, not quite the color of Orlan's green, but even though I have Hal's the green in his costume generally being kind of a cold green, but because he's the hero, I wanted his ring to be a really warm green. And if I recall, I made Orlan's ring. I don't know if he uses his ring much. Yeah. There's a point later on where he does, but I think anyway, I made Orlan's ring, the special effects on that, a little colder, even though his costume is a little bit warmer. I think I did that because I wanted Hal's ring to stand out more. Warmer colors look more inviting, kind of. And also it helped to offset or to contrast the blue of the Purge. So,
which is interesting because the Purge sees what it's doing as adapting everything to it. Even the genocide. It's I think it doesn't look at the genocide as killing. It looks at the genocide as adapting the creatures to what it sees as a cleansing, to what it sees as creating a cleaner place. So it doesn't see it as killing and murder, which was an interesting distinction. It really saw it as bettering life, bettering thing. I don't know if life so much, but bettering the state of things for everything involved.
Right.
It's just a very twisted villain.
It's good. It's good villain building, I think. And we learn later that he actually has a story.
It is interesting though that Orlan, because Orlan was adapted, that Orlan eventually takes responsibility for this. Like Hal is able to actually, even though the Purge is a major part of this, he is talking to Orlan as well, which is an interesting little twist.
This whole sequence was interesting because this is always a problem. I had this problem actually on the JLA issue because it all takes place underground in the dark. The JLA issue is the question of where do you draw the line in terms of making a superhero's costume stand out? He's the Green Lantern. He should be green, this really strong green color. But then he's in an environment with this blue light, this black light effect, and where to draw the line. How much green to leave in there. I think what I did was on page 20, you have that big panel of him entering the room and the rays, that bluish light coming out. In that panel, I washed out most of his green. It's. I mean, you can see some green there, but it's a pretty bluish green. And then I brought it back a little bit, and then washed it out. Well, no, I pretty much brought it back because this is a dramatic moment where he's struggling. You want to have that green. You want to have him be highly identifiable at that point, I think.
I like, too, though, what we saw as the panels get more enclosed and he's closer to the Purge. We see a shift, too, as well, where there's more blues involved in Hal's costume. And it's slowly reflecting the fact that the Purge is kind of overwhelming the situation. And then that shot of Cora's eyes was where we get to see that Cora's witnessing this. That was when I first started to get the hint. I'm like, what kind of adversary is the Sage, is Cora at this point, to the Purge? And then, I started to gradually, as the story was developing, start to realize, wow, that's the Sage. And it was really interesting how that was gradually, that mystery was developing. But I loved that framing of her there first, like she was watching it, and what the horrific thing was that she was seeing, with Hal's body being overwhelmed by the blue from the Purge, and it hurts. Again, continuing through the dialogue, and what could hurt Hal Jordan like that?
Yeah, and drain the ring that quickly. I mean, that's just maybe a minute passes tops there, and this was a tricky page because there's a lot of special effects here and layers of color, but literally you've got the green of Hal's costume being overcome by this black light stuff, and the special effect around the hand of the bad guy here. I tried a couple things with that, and I love a lot of experimentation on this page.
It turned out beautiful. I mean, it's a cliffhanger page, so it's really important as far as to hook you in to the next issue. And I remember the intensity and it's the horror of the situation.
In retrospect, I think just looking at it, I think I would have added some red around Hal's head in the background, kind of like a reddish, just to make it look more like he's screaming. But anyway.
To add that emotion of pain.
Yeah. Oh, well.
I liked it.
A note to myself.
Issue 21, because...
21.
The opening page of that, talk about where we left him off. Boy, did we jump right back into that and I liked that it was from a different angle.
Yeah.
Because that's... one of the things I appreciate with your color work, and I talked about it when we did the close-ups before of Orlan's wife, you see it again here. your light sourcing changes because of where it's being delivered from, and
Right.
we get to see a very different look at the Purge. We get a different look at Hal, and the color tones that you use then change to reflect the fact that we're seeing it from a different angle. Those
Yeah.
are tiny details that you do, and I've noticed it in your work, and I really appreciate it because it is something that it captures my eye right away, and that I did like that distinction.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. It's always nice to hear that people notice that kind of thing. And yeah, there's essentially a 180-degree change in perspective here, and the result is that you have your bright light is on the other side of the object in the foreground. Maybe I'm confusing that, but you've got Hal, who's lit from the other side, and so we see a lot of black on him, which helps a smart decision on the part of Doug, is that you have a lot of black in him on Hal. A lot of him is in shadow because of the bright light of Purge there, and that, I think, helps make it look like Hal is at a distinct disadvantage here.
Well, yeah, and you used a darker tone on the colors coming off of the Purge, the Purge energy. And what I liked is we got to see it from Hal's perspective this time instead of from the Purge's perspective, and it was darker and fiercer to me. It was that added to kind of like the horror of the situation.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's. I think to some degree that was just me getting used to like what I was doing. I mean, after working on a whole issue, you have sometimes you have a little bit of a breather, and you come back and start working on a next issue. And so I had some time. There's like a part of my brain like working on stuff. And I came back and I dealt with Purge's colors differently in this issue. I think a little bit stronger, a little more bold, basically, a little bit less tentative.
Yeah, one thing I liked was whenever you're really seeing the Purge, flex his muscle and just unload it, it's more of a purplish, more of a tint to like his energy blast and the energy around him. So it's a darker, mix of the reds and the blacks of that blue that is the Purge body. So that really, for me, always was like, okay, he's throwing down some energy here.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm not just making this up. I recall now that was a choice. That when he's attacking, I wanted there to be some red in that, and so you get a purple. But with him, because he's the bad guy and he's evil and all that, I wanted to keep him as cold as possible. I mean, I do use a little bit of purple in him, but he's mostly that really cold blue.
I like as we get back into Marika here, we start to see a little bit of a shift because we go back to the home environment again, where we see Orlan, well, basically the Purge still in
Right.
Still in Orlan at this point. The intensity of Orlan, the way he's carrying himself, it's much darker. You can see it in his face. You can see it in the way he's carrying himself, and especially when we get to see, him grabbing from the organic, structure that's over there.
The tree thing.
Yeah, and just basically showing that he's snapped at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, this again a choice on Doug's part that of that first panel, the way that he's staged it. Orlan is lit from behind, so he has a lot of black in him. He's looking down at us, basically. It makes him look, ominous.
It was interesting, too, though, that the Purge made sure that the wife couldn't reason with Orlan. Because she was getting ready to, chastise him, and then out from the ring comes, this muzzle and cuffs. And I thought that was an interesting little twist on the whole thing. So she didn't have an opportunity, so he could deal with the Phantom Stranger. I just thought that was an interesting twist. But probably one of my favorite visual sequences, because I noticed you did a skin tone shift on his wife here, was in the dream sequence.
Yeah, I tried to warm her up there, just because that made sense.
Well, because she was welcoming him to the possibility of going on to a rest. Which, for a character like his, you figure the Phantom Stranger is like this immortal-style character who's lived for, the longest time. At this point, the rest, and it is part of the problem, it's something he feels guilty about later, the rest is so attractive to him. Like this chance to kind of finally walk away and to finally no longer be this. We talked about like he constantly has to be like this. I don't want to say puppet master because that's not really his role, but this observer who will interact and guide. But he seems to have done this for like the longest time. And
he has a hard job.
Yeah. And it would be appealing to a creature like that to finally say, you've earned your rest. You've done that. It's time to go. And that comfort that you did, it's one of the things I wanted to compliment on what you did with her skin tones. It was a very comforting, kind of a calm, welcoming moment that you could tell it was... He was walking into the light. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah. It's drawn that way, too. I mean, he's kind of floating in the plant, and then there's a frame that's just of her hand with the shaft of light, and then a panel of her hand in the foreground reaching out to us, and then that light at the end of the tunnel there. And I made the tunnel like a fleshy color, a warm, this whole dream sequence, really warm, because it's, supposed to be inviting.
So then finally Cora reaches him at this point and wakes him up, and the close-up of her eyes and and just wake up! just such a great, powerful moment from her because there was a definite... It was funny how much life there was in the mouth sequence.
Yeah, that mouth is really well drawn, I have to say.
Because it really was, even in contrast, when we see her, like, originally she looks very frail at first. When she first, like, starts pleading with him. But as he zips in closer and closer, it's very powerful that you don't expect her to all of a sudden unleash with all this emotion. It was just an interesting moment. Like, what would it take to wake up a man like the stranger? And that's why I said before, it was neat to see that was not something that could happen externally. It needed to come from the inside out.
Right. I made a point with Cora. I used two different colors. Actually, but when I'm coloring, I have a couple different things I keep using. I have a bunch of what are called swatches. And they're basically colors I've chosen, which I can save in a little box, basically. And I actually had two different colors. Well, okay, I have the swatches and I have the actions, which I described before, which is basically tints. In both cases, I had two different colors for her eyes. One when she was half asleep or drugged or just like not active, and then a brighter color when she's being active or happy or like more alive. Basically, it's just one of those little distinctions I thought was important.
It was funny all along because I do love the bit that the Phantom Stranger knew about all this, which was really funny on the whole thing. The Purge, it's funny as he went on. There's a richer tone to him as he seems to gain in power. Especially when he's fighting with Hell. I really liked that we got to see more, like the bluer when we zip into his face. You get really kind of a glimpse of just how much power he's exuding because we're that close to him now. It's no longer from a distance where we see a lot more of the white around him because we're seeing that power pouring out of him from a distance. We're really up close and we get some kind of detail to this creature.
I did a blur on his face on the last panel on page 6. I did a blur on most of his face, and that was actually a suggestion from Doug because I had rendered it, and then we were looking at it, and it needed something dramatic, and he suggested that, and I think it works really well. It's a blurred except around the eye, basically.
It kind of gives the some facial structure without like a definite rigid lock in it. It's still that energy. He's still like a massive energy matter, but there is a form and a structure to it.
And also, I think it makes it look like those swirls on him are moving, kind of. As if they're not stationary. There's something going on there. It's changing.
This is another one of those bits where it's amazing how a change in tone will work to show the power of a character. The Phantom Stranger, again, like we say, he's a character who a lot of times is used in the role of the observer. So you don't really get to see his power. But when there's moments like this that you get to really see just how tough this guy is and what he's really capable of. This is a creature he's going toe-to-toe with who's wiped out whole worlds with no problem at all, including a Muppet. So it's
including a Muppet. He's that evil.
Yes. But I mean, it's one of those things that, like, you see now in the colors, the Purge, in every sequence we've seen the Purge in before this one, he's completely overwhelmed the panels. Now that the Phantom Stranger is here, he's basically showing him that, you have no power over me. The authority I have is much greater than yours, and you're going to be schooled.
Yeah. Here we were talking about this earlier with the Purge. I used in that first panel on page 7. Obviously, I made him more purple because he's attacking. Basically, he's throwing his goop or his purple tendrils at the Phantom Stranger, and of course, the Phantom Stranger will have none of that. I love it.
It's Purge juice.
Yeah.
Purge juice. Purge juice. That's a new flavor of Gatorade there.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It's a new energy drink.
Yeah. And it's less filling.
Yeah.
Purge Surge. You want to get the Purge Surge. God. Okay.
I liked the sense of because I liked that it wasn't all bright and happy after this, because his wife is dead. Orlan feels responsibility. At this point in time, the Phantom Stranger feels responsibility too. So all of that is still with us. It's like they feel that the characters are still carrying a weight on their shoulder, which really kind of worked for me in these sequences, because it doesn't go to like a bright, happy. A lot of times when these sequences happen, it goes bright and happy. Hey, everybody's okay. Even if it goes back to the villains afterwards, you have that moment. We don't have that moment here. They are survivors.
Yeah, we're only a little more than halfway through the story here.
Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. You mentioned that like all three of these heroes here right now are in their heads thinking, "Man, I screwed up," or how did I let that happen?
Yeah, and it's the sense of responsibility here was something that I really ate up.
The fact that Hal knows he was afraid. It was, that was a huge thing for me, and because he's the Green Lantern, he's able to overcome fear, and he felt that he was afraid of what he saw, and you see that despair in his face, and just that, I can't believe how could I do this? And it was definitely one of those. It tugged at the, throughout all the panels, just tugged at the heartstrings, and you're just like, wow, this is a. You kind of can hear the, the sad music going on in the back of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
The powerful moment here was with Orlan, though, because to see him go through, and I'm glad that there was a lot of panels that developed this, where we got to see this, because we got to get into his head and see that what was happening with the Purge. He was aware of what the Purge was doing and how the Purge manipulated him and was changing his thoughts and whatever, but takes full responsibility of that because they were his hands. They were his actions. Even though he was manipulated into doing this, and now is very well aware. It's clear that this character is visualizing in his head exactly what happened to his wife. He saw it.
And it was he did it with his own hands.
Art actually took a break here because he had to go take care of his cats. So it's actually a really good point for us to take a break in this particular interview. We'll be back next week with part 2 of this. Hope you enjoyed the first part. Joining me right now is Jason Page, Darth Dad from the forums and from the Fanboy Face-Off podcast. And Jason, you're here to talk about the Denver Comicfest 2009, which is going to be April 17th through the 19th. And it was interesting because I didn't know until you had messaged me that you were involved in putting together and being a part of putting together a con. So let's talk about that experience.
It was really, Sean, it was really kind of really unusual. I mean, as a lifelong comic book fan, it was really something that I never thought would fall into my lap, because usually it's one of those things, we all sit around the comic shop, or we all, sit around the house with a beer talking with our friends about Comic Cons, going, well, if I was running one, I would do this, this, and this. So to have the opportunity was just amazing. And essentially how that happened was there was a smaller con here in Denver that had been going on for a number of years called Majesticon. They sold the convention to the Starfest group, which is a longtime science fiction convention here in Denver. And when I heard this, my wife and I, we actually fly either my parents or her parents out to visit for the con week, for the sci-fi con weekend, so my wife and I can get a hotel and hang out at the con all weekend. So and she'd been taking photographs there for years, so she knew some people. So I contacted those people and told them, hey, you know, I've got a comic podcast. I know some local comics creators. I'd love to, you know, help, get those people involved with the con. Well, they emailed me back and said, you know, let's meet up and talk about what you can do. And essentially they said, well, you got a lot of great ideas. We know nothing about comics. We just wanted to add this to the lineup. Do you want to run the convention?
Wow. No pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And my one mistake is I said yes before asking my wife, but fortunately,
You know what? I would have a hard time avoiding that myself.
but fortunately, you know, like your wife, Sean, Ange is my wife is just fantastic, and you know, when I told her about it, she was actually more excited about it than I was. Just because she knows how important this is to me, and was actually her. She got tired of listening to me talk about you and Jim so much and Raging Bullets, and she bought me podcasting equipment so I could do my own podcast. So I would stop talking about you guys. So she's been really supportive of my comics habit. I don't think she quite knew how bad it was when we got married. And
well, it's in sickness and in health, so it's like
exactly.
And this is clearly on the sickness end of things.
Yeah,
but
yeah, and that is definitely true. But yeah, and so pretty much from that point in January, I began calling and writing every person that I knew, either directly or indirectly, from the podcast about any help I could get with putting on the con, with getting guests and just having help running some of the things going on at the con. What's really fantastic is you guys indirectly actually help put this con together, because without your show, I would never have met Bruce McIntosh. I think he sent you guys the book, The B-List Characters of the DC Universe. I was on my way home from work, heard you guys talking about his book, gave his email address as Bruce in Colorado. I emailed him that day. We've been in touch ever since. And of course, when I told him about the con, he wanted in as well, and he's been a big help. The flyers that are up on that I posted on the forums and all that kind of stuff like that, he designed all of those.
I'm looking at one on MySpace right now as well. It's myspace.com/comicfest for anybody that wants to check it out on MySpace.
He took we worked with Amy Reeder Hadley, who obviously did the Madame Xanadu image there in the background, worked with her to be able to use that image, and of course Vertigo to use that image, and we're able to put together, I think, a really fantastic flyer that really shows kind of the type of show that we're trying to put on, which it's definitely it's going to be a smaller show this year, but we're trying to do some things that are not typical of a smaller show, and something that my goal in the future is to grow this into something about the size of a Heroes Con, because that's my personal favorite comic book convention. I think it's a great show. I went there as a kid growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I just think it's a small con that where you get that much more personal feel than some of the larger ones, and but you still get that larger con experience with the with the big name DC panels, Marvel panels, and those types of things like that. And that's kind of what I wanted to be able to do, with a little bit of a twist. This actually just finalized yesterday. And obviously this is a DC website, DC podcast. So, but I know you guys are just comic fans in general. I actually got an email from a director of marketing over at Marvel. Brian Bendis and Jeff Loeb are going to be joining us via teleconference.
Oh, very cool.
We're going to be doing a Marvel Mondo panel with those guys. I haven't heard back from DC. I'll go ahead and say it, and just everybody realize, if you're listening to this, that this is not for sure yet, because DC has not given the thumbs up yet. But I'm in talks with Eddie Berganza, who is the editor for Green Lantern and Blackest Night, as well as Matt Idelson, the Superman editor, to do a DC Nation panel with those two, same style as the Marvel Mondo panel. Do it by a teleconference. Smaller con, don't have the budget to fly in a lot of huge name folks, but definitely want to give people that haven't had the chance to do what you guys do and go to a Chicago, go to a New York, and are able to attend and see those folks firsthand and the excitement that they generate at those panels, and want to be able to do that. Real similar to what we're doing with a podcast. Have those people on the phone, have pictures up, and just feel their excitement about things developing in the Marvel universe, the DC universe, and stuff like that. Like I said, the Marvel panel is locked in. Unfortunately, for Saturday at 2:00. Unfortunately, the DC panel is not confirmed yet, but everything looks like it'll be a go. But I don't want to. I haven't committed to it yet.
When I see that you guys have, you guys are really, especially like with MySpace and obviously with the forum community and stuff like that, you've already been. So when those things are when those things are finalized, that's something that they'll find out either from the MySpace page or, of course, from the forums to check out and find out what's going on with those panels. But you've got, I'm a big convention fan in general, and I'm talking about like small, intimate conventions and big conventions as well. And there's pros to a smaller convention as far as you tend to get more face time with the creators that are there. You tend to be able to have conversations with them. You tend to be able to really kind of, when you go to those panels, they tend to be more intimate panels where you really get to know the person and have a connection there. You get when you're at the bigger conventions, a lot of times the honest truth is you got a question, your odds are pretty good you're probably not going to be able to ask it because there's so many people there. Or if you're lucky, you're going to get one. In those panels, when I've been at the smaller cons, you've still got a large crowd, a nice enough group of people that, you feel like you're part of a large community, but it's intimate enough, too, that you can sometimes get in 2 or 3 questions and be a part of a discussion. You got Brian Wood there from DMZ and Northlanders, both which are 2 of my favorite series out of Vertigo right now. Northlanders especially, I was just reading Northlanders today, as a matter of fact, it's delivered everything that I hoped that series would be. You mentioned Amy Reeder Haley. Madame Xanadu, I'm a big fan of Matt Wagner anyway, but this artwork, when they first started doing the promo pieces for this series, has been such a surprising, because I didn't know who she was.
Yeah, same here.
Such a surprising draw to this series for me is just how pretty a book it is. Very unique style, very fresh style, and it totally fits the whole magic world of Madame Xanadu that they're crafting, and I love the historical journey that we get in that book. But you've got authors like Kevin J. Anderson that's going to be there, and I was looking through the guest list. You've got media guests there as well. William Catt's going to be there, and you've got small press guests there as well, which I love that because that's my opportunity to kind of find out there's a lot of small press out there, and the one way to sell me on a book is to be able to talk to the person who's creating the book. And Noah Van Sciver I see is there, which is Ethan Van Sciver's brother, I believe.
That is in fact true.
So just an incredible guest list, which I'm not even doing justice at the moment of guests there. So it's Mike Barron, who I love Mike Barron. So go ahead.
I was just going to add that actually what's really fun about this is that what really transformed me from a Marvel guy as a kid to a DC guy was the transition post-crisis with Justice League International, the Giffen DeMatteis run, as well as those first 13, 14 issues of the Mike Baron Flash. I actually, as a teenager, got my issue 1 of Flash signed by Mike Baron and I can't remember the Jackson Geiss at Heroes Con back in 87, 88. So when that book initially came out. So for me, this is like, going home again, being able to because I literally read Flash 1 so many times the cover fell off the staples. And my mom and dad, they weren't really comics fans, but like your mom was, they were really supportive of my interest in comics, and they were kind of yelling at me. They were like, you've got the signed comic and it's falling apart. What are you doing? But it was just a book that I enjoyed so much. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's been great talking to him on the phone, and I'm really looking forward to. We actually encountered a local Mike Baron expert at a comic book shop in Colorado Springs, and he asked me about moderating the panel, and I wholeheartedly agreed. And I'm looking forward to attending that panel because I've enjoyed Nexus, but I've only read limited Nexus stuff. So I'm looking forward to learning more about this writer that, as you said, I've really enjoyed for a long time now.
What has been one of the biggest surprises with being dealing with a con on this level versus being there as a fan and that type of thing? What's been like the biggest surprise for you in this whole thing?
On the positive side, I would say what's been the biggest surprise is the creators. Like I have emailed a number of creators just cold and said, both inviting them to the con as well as asking about their interest. We're going to be having a really, really great Hero Initiative silent auction. There's some great stuff we're going to be auctioning off. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I emailed these folks, and sometimes within hours I would get responses back, and a lot of times it was like, oh my God, I really want to come, but I'm already going to – there's an FX show in Orlando the same weekend. There's also another show in Seattle the same weekend. And so because of my late start on this, there were already some other commitments, but just how excited people were about a new con coming up, and about how interested in that they were to coming out to Denver, and just how I think one of the things that I learned from your show as you guys started doing interviews, and then from as my show came about and we started doing them, was just how down to earth most of the creators are, and I've had a lot of great just phone conversations with these people, which would never have been possible without being on this side. So to me, that was just a wonderful surprise. And one of the things that I really love about comics in general is it's as big of a hobby as it is, it's still a pretty small world. And I've been learning more and more about the whole 6 degrees of separation of how close I've been to actually knowing a lot of various people. I mean, one of our artists, Armando Duruthi, was inking a lot of Jim Lee's stuff at Wildstorm years ago, before Scott Williams came on the scene. So one step away from a tremendous talent like Jim Lee. So that's been really, really amazing.
Well, I'm looking here. He has credits on Gen 13, Iron Man, Nova, Wildcats. I mean, those are some heavy duty credits.
Yeah, and that there's a great. I sent him a picture of the Denver skyline, and he's the one who did that wonderful image that I have up of the Silver Surfer flying out of the Denver skyline, which is the cover of our sketchbook that we did. And he's an amazing artist, and he's been just fantastic to work with.
And let's talk about some of the events that are going to be going on at the con. What are some of the things that fans can expect to see, or fans should try to make sure to get scheduled or participate in when they're at the con?
One of the things that I'm really excited about, and I just found this out 2 days ago, is one of our local artists, Zach Howard. I believe he's up in Fort Collins. He actually emailed me and said he's going to be the artist for the Dark Horse upcoming Aliens book.
Oh, cool.
And he emailed me and said he got permission from Dark Horse to debut the first page of the book at the con.
Oh, awesome.
And I'm, I've never read a single Aliens comic book, but I'm really stoked about that because any chance I get to see something that is new and different and exciting like that, I get really jazzed about. It's going to be a fun panel anyway, because it's going to be a panel about property comics, licensed property comics. You mentioned William Catt earlier, so he's currently writing the Greatest American Hero comic from Arcana. He's going to be at the panel. We have another artist that does a lot of IDW work. He's doing Ghostbusters and Angel and Terminator. He's also worked with Mike Barron to do the most recent Badger miniseries. So he's done a lot of great work. He's actually, I can't remember what issue it is. I think it's Angel issue 19. He did a painted cover for that I highly recommend everybody going to look at because it is absolutely outstanding. My wife is a photographer and an artist and is not easily impressed, and she was impressed. So that's about as high of an endorsement as I can give on anything.
You were mentioning Dark Horse before, and one of the nice things about I've read a number of the Dark Horse Aliens miniseries. I haven't read all of them, but I've read a number of them, and I'm also currently reading their Buffy series, their season 8 series.
Yeah, fantastic series.
Oh, it's a great series. One of the nice things, though, when we talk about licensed comics right now, there was this stretch there where licensed comics were kind of it was really a crapshoot. You didn't know, am I going to be getting a good story, or is it somebody who just totally doesn't get it that's just like phoning something in? Nowadays, licensed comics have really stepped up, and they are top quality books and they're getting top quality people that really understand the properties. I mentioned the Buffy one right now. It's a great example of a series that I feel really, it feels like TV episodes. Every time I read one of those comics, I feel like I got a brand new TV episode. And I think that's becoming more and more the standard with licensed comics now, where, there's something out there for everybody that enjoys these, shows that don't exist. Like the William Catt one, I was a huge fan of Greatest American Hero. That's... to have a series of that again, you get nostalgic for those type of things, and you want something that's interesting and quality that'll help you kind of revisit that, but fresh and new at the same time.
I was completely in your court. There were a lot of times over the years. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and there are a lot of times over the years where I felt like I was getting a real mixed bag with my Star Trek comics. Sometimes I'd have some truly great ones, and other times. Does this person has this person ever even watched an episode or watched one of the movies? And I really think that really since the start of Buffy season 8, I think just property comics in general, I think other publishers took note of what Whedon was doing with Buffy and said, if we put the right artists, we get the right writers, this will be a book that will draw people. And I think, Marvel followed suit with what they're doing with Stephen King's Dark Tower series and stuff like that as well. And then that, to me, that's just been, the highest quality that you could ask for.
The Stand is very good too. They're publishing. They're on the second miniseries now of his really magnum opus, The Stand, and adapting that. And that's also been just the same quality you're talking about with Dark Tower. The Stand is just a brilliant read.
Yeah, and it's something that I think that we all. we all have budgets and stuff like that we have to stick to. But whereas before with me, my property comics were some of the first things I would cut. That's not the case right now. The IDW Star Trek line, Dark Horses, to me, the two they're putting out right now, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic and Buffy Season 8, to me are right up there with my top reads over at DC that there's just no way I'm going to drop.
And that's not, it's really nice right now because I remember Property Comics used to be one, like you said, and it wasn't all bad. There were some really good ones in there. There were gems. There was arcs that were wonderful. And then there were other times where it felt like either we were redoing an arc or something like that. It's really nice right now that you can pick up a licensed comic that you like and really feel like you can stay on board for 25, 30 issues.
Yeah.
And you're going to get something that's entertaining for that entire time.
To me, it's been a welcome change, and I think it's something that I'm hoping. I know at the comic book shops that I shop at locally, if I'm just sitting around the shop chatting, I'm amazed at the number of people that will come in and ask now specifically for a Dark Tower comic, for a Buffy comic, for an Angel comic, and that next group of readers, those new readers we always talk about. It's good to see these people that have never really given a comic a chance. Now that they're hearing some positive buzz about some of their favorite TV shows and movies that are no longer currently running right now, what kind of quality they can get out of that. It's good to see that coming out in the comic shops.
Absolutely. Besides that, what else is going on at the con? You mentioned an auction. What's going to be going on with that?
Basically, we're going to be doing a silent auction to 100% of the proceeds are going to be going to the Hero Initiative, which I know you guys are big supporters of.
Oh yeah.
Was really interesting was Bruce and I were kind of talking about, okay, we want to do something that's going to inspire generosity and have some good items and stuff like that people are going to want to bid on. And we were kind of debating about a couple of different options, and the more we talked about it, the more it was just a natural fit that it would be the Hero Initiative, just because of what that organization stands for. And what's been really amazing, and I mentioned it earlier, is just the response that I got back. I emailed Mark Andreyko, the writer for Manhunter, emailed him, asked him if he had something he'd like to donate to our auction. Said I couldn't get him out to Denver this year, but want to make that happen in the future. He responded back, and he was like, "Well, how about a complete signed run of Manhunter?"
Sweet.
And so we're going to have the complete series. I think it's issues 1 through 38. I think 38 was the last issue. Complete run. He's also throwing in a Manhunter Volume 1 trade paperback signed, as well as Nightwing Annual 2, that fantastic Barbara Gordon, Dick Grayson story from a few years back. That'll be...
What's great about that is, too, for anybody, if you've never read this and you're going to be at the con, it's a great thing to bid on, because that's going to be the co-feature in Batman Streets of Gotham, written by Andreyko. So, yeah. I mean, it's a great time right now to jump on board and grab that and read the whole run signed by him. That's awesome. I'm jealous.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that, like, when I got the email back, I was like, my jaw dropped. I was like, are you sure you want to give that much? And he's like, no, absolutely. He's like, I'm a big supporter of the Hero Initiative, and want to give you something that's going to inspire some generosity. And so, thanks cannot go out highly enough for what Mark did. We also got a Justice League sketch cover, issue 1, signed by Brad Meltzer. It was one of the Turner sketch covers.
Wow.
I believe it was the 1 in 100 variant. So, this is this is already an item without without being signed, but Brad was generous enough to donate that as well. We also one of our local comic shops, I Want More Comics, in Westminster, they actually donated to us a Ethan Van Sciver framed and signed Green Lantern poster, which was the image from Green Lantern Rebirth 1. So, fantastic image signed by Ethan Van Sciver. So another really great item to bid on. Matt Sturgis, I haven't got him in yet, so I'm not sure which ones he sent us. But he donated. He told me he was going to send me a hodgepodge of signed trades between House of Mystery, Fables, Jack of Fables, and Blue Beetle. So some great Matt Sturgis signed items. We also are going to Library Bindings. The good folks over at Library Bindings. We had some different comic shops donate issues of DMZ, Madame Xanadu, and Nexus. We sent those issues off to Library Bindings. They bound those for us, and we're going to have Brian Wood, Amy Hadley, and Mike Barron sign those as appropriate, and those will be up for auction as well. Wow. And I know I'm forgetting stuff.
Yeah, but what you're and by the very fact that you've already delivered a lot, and you're already forgetting stuff. You've got a ton right there in itself. That's you had me at the first item. So that's really cool.
We've also got some local artists who have donated who are donating some original artwork and things like that. So there's going to be a wide variety of things to bid on. We're going to have a table set up with brochures about the Hero Initiative for people that aren't familiar with this great organization, can get a chance to read up on it prior to bidding. And then we'll have stuff set up where people can jot down their name, email address, the item that they're interested in their bid, and submit those. And we'll be in touch during the con about who was the winning bid. So there's definitely going to be a chance to take home, and this is even getting into the dealer's room. This is just this is a chance to take home some great unique collector's items that you're probably not going to be able to find. Well, you're not going to be able to find in the dealer's room. Right. So,
how has the dealer support been?
That's been the one thing that's been the biggest. You talk about surprise. I was surprised there wasn't more excitement generated from a lot of the local shops about getting involved with the con. However, I've talked with some other people, and they say that's pretty typical, that even at New York and Chicago and the bigger cons, typically the shops don't participate real heavily. But we've got a lot of turnout just from, and it's really been funny. I've gone into comic shops to hang up posters and talk to shop owners and customers and just chit-chat comics and the con, and at least 3 or 4 people in the shop that I've walked into, well, do you have information? He's like, I've got some ideal statues on eBay, and I'd love to have a table. So there's been a huge turnout, just not necessarily from the places that I was expecting. So that's been very, very intriguing. There's definitely going to be some comic shops there. Just I figured that every one of them would be there, but that definitely hasn't been the case. But there's definitely going to be a wide variety of dealers from outside the shop there, which I think is pretty exciting.
Well, that's fun too, because a lot of times when you come into town for a comic convention, it's fun to be able to you've got like dealers that are at the con that you wouldn't normally see in the area. But then also, like, when you're not at the con and you want to step out and take a break from the con, you can hit some of the local shops and things like that, and you're getting a different atmosphere. So it's kind of a nice little symbiotic relationship then with the con and the local shops being able to kind of do both.
I think you actually summed it up better than a lot of the shop owners that I've talked to, because that's essentially the answer that they've been giving me when I've kind of asked them about their interest in in showing up as dealers. And it's really been interesting because all of them have been interested in coming to the con and bringing in stuff to get signed so they can, have signed merchandise available at their stores for later dates. But it's just they want to maintain to have that option of getting that crossover appeal from folks coming in, which from someone putting together the con is a little bit disappointing, but from a business sense, I understand completely where they're coming from.
Have they been supportive? Has there been a lot of community support for advertising for the con?
Yeah, that's what's been absolutely amazing. Is virtually every place that I've walked into and asked about putting out flyers and hanging up posters, and my wife made up some fantastic bookmarks that with the Watchman font that say "Watch for Comicfest."
Oh, very cool.
And they're just really outstanding. We've been able to put those into a lot of bookstores. And that's been really exciting. Everybody's been really supportive of that. There hasn't been one place that I've walked into that has said, no, we're not interested. So I definitely think as comics have gone more mainstream, people definitely see this as a business opportunity for themselves, and have been willing to do that for that reason. So it's been really it's been really nice. And you talked about surprises earlier. Again, another surprise about how willing a lot of businesses outside of comics have been willing to support us.
I went with a buddy of mine. This past summer, there was a Screaming Tiki Con, which is a local con here, and very similar size-wise and scale-wise to what you're talking about with Comic Fest. And he's not a comic reader, but he walked out of there with merchandise. He walked out of there with things from local creators and talent, and stuff that he would walking in probably never would have considered purchasing, but talking to people, getting interested in their passion and what they were talking about, hearing a little bit about the material, he ended up walking out with a whole bunch of things from dealer tables and from that he just said, I had such a good time talking to these people that he said, I'm interested in taking a look at what they're doing. That's part of the fun of the community, though, supporting advertising is you're going to get people that are going to pop in that maybe wouldn't normally stop by a comic shop, maybe wouldn't normally take that step, that might now all of a sudden give this medium and give some of these creators a chance and maybe find something that they never realized comics can do. So that's kind of an interesting little twist. I love seeing new conventions pop up. In the back of DC Nation, it was last week or the week before, and I think it was Ian Sattler who wrote it. I don't remember who. I'm not 100% sure, but there was the headline was Convention Season, and the premise of the article was that it's really like that term, Convention Season, isn't really valid anymore because comic conventions are going on throughout the year, and there's more local cons. There's bigger cons that are appearing all over the place. There's local cons like the one you're talking about right here, Comic Fest, that's growing and offering big name creators like you guys have got at this one, and a chance for those intimate relationships with those creators. And I love the fact that you're trying to get video teleconferencing with the big companies as well as having the local talent and small press, because that's part of the fun of cons for me as well. This is the type of thing right now. There isn't a convention season anymore. It really is year-round. You got to be keeping your eye out because there's great opportunities like this locally to pop by and see. And also, I'm looking at this, I'm like, geez, I really wish I could fly out to this. I'm loving Madame Xanadu. Literally, I'm not kidding about this. Sitting right in front of me right now on my table is Madame Xanadu issue 7. I was planning to reread 7, 8, and 9. So I'm taking a look and looking through these right now, and her artwork is so gorgeous.
Since you're bringing up her artwork, I have to say, and you might disagree with me on this, but my opinion is, I think it's issue 8, which is the cover of her walking through the streets of London with the dead woman hanging above her and the blood raining down over her, and the blood pooled like raindrops at her feet, in my opinion, has been the best cover of 2009. I think that is an absolutely brilliant image, and I absolutely love it.
Well, this is one of those series that I hope generates more readership, because to me, when they look at, they just collected Sandman and Absolute, which was an art showcase. More of these series that are being collected in Absolutes, the only reason why you really do an Absolute, and I don't mean this in any insult to the writing, for me, I get a hardcover for the writing. For the artwork, you want the oversized pages, because that's where you really get to showcase what the artist was doing. And this is a series where, seriously, I hope it gains enough readership and fan following that eventually we can see this artwork done in some form of oversized hardcover. Maybe, if it doesn't hit an Absolute, these new deluxe edition hardcovers that DC's been doing are a little bit bigger, because I have the one for RIP, and it's a little bit bigger than the comics are, and you get to see the artwork a little larger, and that really is nice when you enjoyed the art presentation to be able to see it the way, because the artist drew them on larger pages, and I want to see it, as close to that, if not that, as possible, because it looks really great and breathtaking, and you catch a lot of the tiny details that they had enjoyed when they were creating it. And this has been a series that certainly, it's a page turner. It is one of those that I do go back through, and I do a second viewing almost immediately, just looking through at the art. That's where I've already read the story through once. At this point in time, I'm going through just to enjoy what intricacies are in the art, and it is one of those where it's a special experience for me because I enjoy the artwork so much.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I read that first issue. Then I found out that Amy was local to Denver, and invited her over to interview on the podcast. And that was one of the conversations I had with her, was the fact that, to me, one of the things that I enjoyed so much was, like you said, after I read it, just flipping through and just looking at the way she does detail. And I think I mentioned this in the interview with her as well. To me, I think her faces really rival that of Kevin Maguire, who, in my opinion, does some of the best faces in comics. So I think she's definitely has some room to improve, but and to get better. But I really see what she's done and what Kevin Maguire has done with facial features and just that expressiveness. I mean, I think you and Jim talked a few months ago about that fantastic Batman Confidential art with that Kevin drew with Catwoman and Batgirl, and to me that was such a joy to read that, and then the same with Madame Xanadu, be able to flip back through it and look at all the detail and extra things that he threw in there that I missed the first and the second time that I read through the book. So, I mean that as you said, this is a series that I've enjoyed enough where I'm probably going to bid myself at the silent auction on the Madame Xanadu library binding, and I'm going to pick up the trade that was just solicited in this past preview as well. So as you said, it is a sickness.
Northlanders is another one of those books we're talking about. Brian Wood has become another one of my favorite series. This Cross and Hammer arc that's currently going on. This month's going to be the sixth part of that one. It's issue 16. But the nice thing about that book, for anybody that's been, like, well, the book's 16 issues in, can I jump on? Yeah, because each of the arcs are very contained. They usually introduce brand new characters in each of the arcs, and it's a wonderful series. It's brilliantly violent. I mean, and it fits, the whole Viking theme. So, I mean, nothing is over the top. It fits the era and what you would expect from that era. And there's it's obviously a lot of core research. He had mentioned way back before, this was a series I was interested in before issue 1 had any preview material or anything like that. He was talking about it at a Wizard World con. And this is a great thing about cons. I encourage people, if you're near Denver, you want to go hear this guy talk, because him talking, I've got every issue of DMZ, and I did not start DMZ at the beginning. He convinced me through just how interesting he was to listen to that I'm like, okay, I got to start picking up this guy's work. And I've got Local from him, which is an absolutely wonderful series. He's a guy, I follow him. Anywhere he's publishing anything, I'm going to pick up Brian Wood material, because he's just an incredibly interesting guy to talk to. And everything that he does, Supermarket was great too, is unique. DMZ is incredibly different than Northlanders. You get 2 very different reads every month, and yet they have the same feel in terms of quality. And he's always trying to do something different. But Northlanders is one in particular I can recommend to people, like if you've been kind of shying away from it. This month with issue 16, it wraps up the Cross and the Hammer storyline, which I would say go pick up all 6 issues of that. But if you want to try something new, next month will be issue number 17. Another jumping on point for that series. Every time a new arc kicks in, it just seems to be a great jumping on point, because it literally is a brand new story set in that era. So it's just a cool book.
And once again, this is another point where I thank you and Jim, because it was you and Jim talking about going and listening to Brian Wood talking at Chicago that convinced me that I needed to go and pick this up and trade. And absolutely, I mean that's why he was on my list to email about coming out to the con, because I knew from listening to you guys talk what an engaging guy he was, and obviously his writing is really top notch, and all 3 of those books that you mentioned are amongst my favorite: DMZ, Northlanders, and Madame Xanadu. And that's one of the things we are doing. I mean, obviously it's only 2 creators. We're going to have a Vertigo panel. We're not only going to talk about those 3 series, but what other books that are coming out from Vertigo that they are interested in and are enjoying, because as you guys talk about on the show quite a bit, there are so many engaging reads from that line, and what they're doing right now with these dollar issues is just, in my opinion, just brilliant. It's a great chance for, as you said, to jump on for virtually no investment, and to me, this really gives the non-traditional reader less of a risk. I can throw down a buck. They can throw down a buck without thinking about it and pick up a story and maybe continue picking it up because of that initial low cost issue, which I think is a great marketing strategy.
And I was laughing too. It's great for me because a recent issue of Air, which I think is a phenomenal series, I'm like, wait, it was a buck? I'm like, all right. I'm already reading it, but sure, that's great. I like the savings. But I like it too because, from my standpoint, I think there's too many great series that get canceled because it's hard for people to know what to jump onto, and it's hard to for people to have that affordable jumping on point where they can try something and yet not break their budget. But then they can try it and then make a decision, is this something that can replace something that maybe I'm kind of not so into right now? Maybe this is going to be that book that's going to, bump me back into excitement at getting a comic every month. And, I think that's doing a $1 jump-on issue like that is just a wonderful program. I see here that you guys have an evening with Brian Wood that's put on by Drawer Boxes, April 18th.
Basically, for those people who don't know about Drawer Boxes, they're those great long boxes and short boxes that basically have the ability to slide out, so that rather than stacking up your long boxes and never being able to access those comics at the bottom, you can stack them up and access anything at any time. Rich Vincent, who is the owner of that company, I bumped into him. He's local here in Denver. I bumped into him in a comic shop, chatted with him, and he's actually the person that's responsible for sponsoring Brian's trip out here. And one of the things we're going to do is, you guys mentioned busy cons, and not really having that opportunity to really get some FaceTime with folks. And so what we wanted to do was to give the opportunity for a small number of people to after hours of the con to hang out and basically sit around and get a chance to get to know Brian personally. And it's going to be a really fun evening. Brian's actually already told me some really funny stories about some nightmare type stories about getting flown into different places and different cons, and some just really kind of like your and Jim's comedy of errors at the airport a few years ago, type of things like that. So he's going to open up, and we're going to talk about those things. We're going to have some snacks, we're going to have some drinks, and talk comics, and whatever else casually just comes up in conversation. So it's going to be a chance to meet some different comic fans in the area, and then B, get a chance to hang out with Brian for a couple hours afterwards. There is an additional cost to that, just just because of the nature of the event, and trying to make it limited and stuff like that. So that we don't want to have a repeat of the con where we have hundreds of people in the room trying to get FaceTime with Brian.
But I also saw too that a portion of those proceeds are also going to the Hero Initiative. So when you buy those tickets, part of that is you're donating it to a charity that's helping out comic creators. So that's a fun thing as well. So
you guys talk about 1,000 times over the course of a month. The Hero Initiative is a fantastic charity, and to me, it was just really important for us wherever we had the opportunity. And this was a charity that Rich Vincent of Drawer Boxes that he had an interest in as well. So it was a really natural thing to make this possible. So. We're definitely excited about the opportunity. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'd like to give a testimonial for Drawer Boxes. A few years ago, Comic Geek Speak, and this is the first generation Drawer Boxes. Now they have the click locks or whatever they call them now. When I get my next batch of Drawer Boxes, I'm excited because they actually lock together now, which they didn't do before. But the ones that I have, I've had them ever since the first generation of Drawer Boxes came out. They announced them on Comic Geek Speak. They did an ad for them. And at the time, it was before I was even podcasting. So we're going back. These Drawer Boxes have been in use now for over 3 years. And I liked them so much, I replaced all of my long boxes with Drawer Boxes. And it's the great thing about Drawer Boxes, for anybody who's got their comic books in long boxes or short boxes stacked, you're probably going through the same thing that I was going through, where you tend to read the things that are in the boxes towards the top,
yep,
but you don't revisit very often the things that are in the boxes towards the bottom, especially depending on how high you have them stacked. With Drawer Boxes, my entire collection is accessible to me. I've had these for over 3 years now. They still work great. I've got them stacked 5 high. They're loaded to the gills. And it's so easy to pull out and access my comics. So if you have not checked out Drawer Boxes, just do yourself a favor and pick up, they usually sell them in bundles of 5. Pick up a bundle of 5. It will change the way you access your comic books. They are such a wonderful invention. I don't know why somebody didn't do it sooner.
and what was really interesting was during my conversation with him when I initially met him was we kind of got back into how this started, and that was exactly how it started. Was he was looking into the fact of had anybody else tried it yet, and so he started playing around because as a lifetime comic fan himself, he wanted to be able to access more of his collection. So I mean, to me, this is another great story of a comic fan that took a little initiative and ingenuity and is really offering a great product, and one that you gave a great testimonial. Same thing for me. I actually have just switched over to the lock boxes, so I've even replaced my drawer boxes that didn't have the locking capability, so that I wouldn't have the problem with tipping. And they're absolutely great. And if you haven't tried them yet, then it's really something, like you said, that you should pick up a pack and check it out, because it's worth the investment if you're a comic fan.
Jason, is there anything else at the con that you want to highlight or spotlight? I want to make sure that we get kind of give a nice look overview of it, because I mean, this con right now, you've got me salivating. And
Well, I'll mention one more thing, and I'm hoping we can do this for you and Jim in the future. But I'm a big fan of the Indie Spinner Rack podcast as well. I was listening to Indie Spinner Rack one night shortly after I was asked to help organize the con, and heard that Charlito is actually from Denver and moved out to New York a few years ago. So my thought was, wouldn't that be great to get him out here? And we were able to do that through the good folks over at Library Bindings. They, in exchange for some advertising time, were able to bring Charlito out. He hasn't seen his parents in like 3 years.
wow, that's cool.
So he's going to get a chance to see his folks. He's going to get a chance to come out to the con. He's going to be covering the con for us, doing live podcasting. He's also going to be moderating some panels for us. And for those people that never listened to the Indie Spinner Rack podcast, if you have any interest in indie comics whatsoever, whether you're a longtime indie fan or whether you're just somebody who just wants to learn, what's out there, so you know what to focus your budget on, it's a show that I can't recommend highly enough. It's right up.
I want to totally echo what you're saying, because I've been listening to it for years, and I've met Charlito multiple times, and one of the nicest guys one of the and funniest guys with a genuine love for comics. That's where I totally connect with him on those levels. So Indie Spinner Rack is a podcast I can totally recommend as well.
So we were able to get him out here for the con, and kind of part of that deal was getting those great library bound volumes that I mentioned for the Hero Initiative auction as well. And he's going to be hosting a panel for us on Friday night called Beyond the Cape and Tights: The Best of Indie Comics. For those of you who are longtime listeners of Indie Spinner Rack, you guys know how great their best of show is. He's going to be joined by some other local guys who that I have met, both as friends and as other independent comics creators who have the same passion and the same widely read indie comics background as Charlito does. So it's going to be a fantastic panel. So if it's something that you've been interested in indie comics, but you don't know where to start because so much of your budget's taken up with DC or with Marvel or whatnot, this is a great chance to find out exactly what's worth checking out for you, because like you guys emphasize a lot. I mean, there's each folks, everybody has their own tastes, and they can really give you some hints about based on some of their insights on what you might be interested in, what you might find worth investing your money on these reads. He's also going to be hosting a webcomics panel, as well as he's going to be the moderator for the Vertigo panel as well. So we're bringing him out. We're making him busy at the same time. We're putting him to work. So, but yeah, I mean, definitely. If you've as you echoed, if you've never met Charlito before, which I've corresponded with them for a while now, I'm a longtime listener to the show. So, kind of like you and Jim, even though we've never actually met, I feel like I know you just because of the hours that I've dedicated to listening to your show over the last few years. The same can be said of Charlito. I can't recommend highly enough for people to come out for those for those panels. And he's gonna be podcasting live, so kind of the same thing that you guys do. If you want to stop by and chat about comics with him, he's going to be there, so it's a great chance to do that as well.
Remember, I want to remind everyone that Comic Fest is in Denver, April 17th to 19th. The MySpace page is myspace.com/comicfest, which I'll have in the show notes going along with this. Is there anything else you want to shout out as far as where people can get news and information on it?
Yeah, we're also on Facebook, so just check out Comic Fest on Facebook, and then you can go to www.starland.com. And that website, there's actually going to be 4 simultaneous cons going on. Ours is just, I've talked about it a lot, but ours is just one section of the con. There's going to be Game Fest right next to us. There's going to be gaming tournaments going on all weekend. So there's going to be if there's not a panel that you're interested in, or you're waiting for a panel and are tired of wandering around the dealer room, you can jump over to Game Fest, get involved with some gaming tournaments, and go that route. There's also Horror Fest. If you're a horror fan, there's going to be a lot of great panels about the horror film industry, as well as some great horror movie screenings, some exclusive screenings. And then there's also Starfest, which is the sci-fi con, the mothership, so to speak. Brett Spiner's going to be there. And just a number of great Star Trek alums are going to be there, as well as some folks from Battlestar Galactica. So this is a multimedia con, so you don't necessarily have to just come out for Comic Fest. That there's going to be stuff for people to do all over all day. So
not even all day, all weekend, because I'm looking at Starfest here. That runs all weekend. You guys run all weekend, so it's really great. You can kind of mosey around to everything all weekend long and really plan out a diverse day every day. So it's really easily, if you're traveling to Denver, there's a lot to do the nice part is in this, I love convention situations where you run into this problem. There's too much to do.
Absolutely.
Which is a good thing, because that means you can maximize your day with things that you really are heavily interested in doing all day long. That makes it so worth it when you're there. There's always something going on that you're going to have a good time with.
Yeah, and this is going to be a really fun opportunity for anyone that has never been to a con. One quick story: I have been doing MySpace searches where I'll type in like cities in Colorado and comics, and just look at some people's interests. And if it looks like they might have some interest in coming out to the con, I'll send them a personal message and invite them to check it out. I actually got a personal message on MySpace back from a woman who had just moved out to Colorado Springs from, I want to say, Seattle. And she thanked me for taking the time to do that, because she had no idea the con was going on, has never been able to go to a Comic Con before, and is really excited about coming out. She gave me her email address and address to put her on her mailing list. So, I mean, to me, it was just a really cool thing that I wasn't expecting. And it's really nice to like you and Jim. I have a lot of enthusiasm about comics, and it's something that I deeply and truly love. And it was just so nice getting that message, and being able to feel that same level of excitement that I feel about comics. And really looking forward to meeting everybody. Obviously, I won't be able to meet everybody who comes out to the show, but I will be moderating some of the panels. I'll have my name is Jason Page sticker slapped, because I'll be one of the staff members, slapped on my chest. So anybody as you and Jim say, please, if you just want to sit around and chat comics for a couple of minutes, I won't be able to chat for long, but I want to chat with everybody about comics all weekend long because it's going to be a great time.
Well, I'm thrilled for you. I'm thrilled for the Denver Comic Fest. This is really, I'm definitely going to be tracking it not only this year, but as it keeps going on. It's definitely one I am definitely going to pop by and come to one of these because
fantastic.
Yeah, because I mean it's a amazing looking, especially with the fact, like you said, you can make it not just a comic weekend, you can make a complete weekend all the way through. But the Comic Fest in itself, I'll be honest with you, I'd fly out for Comic Fest with everything you've got there. I could make a whole weekend very easily with everything you've got going on at Comic Fest, and that's probably the most sincere compliment I can give to Comic Fest right now. Is I'm like, wow, that's just really a packed convention and a very intimate convention, those are always fun for me because I feel like I can see everybody that's at the con and be able to do everything that's at the con and participate in all of that, and that's wonderful. So I'm thrilled for you, and I want to thank you. You've been for people who've listened for a long time, your name is one that obviously listeners should remember. You sent in audio comments, and you've been a participant of the show for quite some time and a friend of the show. And if you haven't checked out Fanboy Face-Off, please make sure to check out the Fanboy Face-Off podcast as well from Jason. And definitely follow Comic Fest and stop by Comic Fest if you're able to be in Denver for that convention.
I want to thank you for, because again, I would not be a podcaster right now if not for the enthusiasm that you and Jim have shown in the medium and of the medium. It's been a great thing for me being a part of your show and for the kindness you guys have shown for me for putting on my silly audio comments and those types of things like that. And once again, thanks for inviting me to come on and talk about the show because it's obviously something I'm very passionate about and excited to talk to any and everybody who's willing to give me 5 minutes to do so.
Well, I was interested, too, because I'm glad you got a chance to share some of your stories of the behind-the-scenes stuff, because, this is kind of interesting, because this is the first time I've been able to talk to somebody directly who I've known who's getting their feet wet at, running a con behind the scenes. And I'm glad that, I didn't know Bruce was involved in this. I'm thrilled that, you and Bruce got hooked up and you got to work together on this. So it's there's definitely a Raging Bullets connection for anybody that, with both of you guys being involved in all this, for people to come out and support you guys and be a part of this convention. So it's great. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the con goes for you guys.
Definitely looking forward to doing a voicemail in the near future, raging about whatever is going on, whatever I'm excited about in comics at the time, and then just giving a brief update of how great the con weekend went because I'm expecting it to just be a really fantastic weekend.
Well, why don't we plan to do a Skype call after the convention's over, when things kind of die down for you a little bit, to talk about kind of what the experience was like? Because I think that'd be interesting to talk about it from the behind-the-scenes perspective of a con. Because I think we as fans all have had the experience of being there at the con, but the kind of behind closed doors, what was it like? How was it running a con? And how did you enjoy that experience? And what was unique and different about that experience as a fan to be involved in this capacity? So why don't we plan to do that after the con's over?
That sounds fantastic. Thanks.
Holy caffeine!
Want to remind you guys to check out Lords of Justice. Whether you're a fan of superheroes, comics, or just action-packed adventure tales, add Lords of Justice to your reading list. Lords of Justice is available from Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and CyberWizardProductions.com. You can find all those links direct in our show notes and straight from our website or the Comics Podcasting Network. So definitely check out Lords of Justice. Our sponsor for this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com, where you can check out The Brave and the Bold Without Sin trade paperback we were just talking about, written by Marv Wolfman and David Hine, art by Phil Winslade, Doug Braithwaite, and of course Art Lyon. Regularly $17.99, 40% off, only $10.79. JSA vs. Cobra, Engines of Faith, number 1 of 6, written by Eric Trotman, art by Don Kramer, and Michael Babinski, cover by Gene Ha. The new Lord of Cobra has shown his true face of evil, and now the JSA stands ready to face Cobra. But the old tactics may not work against this new terrorist network. Conspiracy mastermind Eric Troutman of Checkmate, Final Crisis Resist, and artist Don Kramer, Detective Comics and Nightwing, take you inside the mind of Jason Burr, the diabolically clever Cobra leader whose goal is nothing less than bringing the world into an age of Kali Yuga. Set throughout the major cities of the DC Universe and wrapped up in a gorgeous cover of Gene Ha, this 6-issue miniseries sets the stakes higher than ever before for the Justice Society. Want to remind you that it also contains the coloring work of friend of the show, Art Lyon. Regularly $2.99, 50% off, only $1.49. So definitely check that out, whatever your shipping preferences. Your bag and boarding preferences, DCBService.com accommodates your collecting needs. Absolute Batman, the Long Halloween hardcover, regularly $75, 37% off, only $47.25. The trade paperback, $19.95, 37% off, only $12.57. InStockTrades.com offers free shipping on orders of $50 or more and has a ton of collect editions in stock and ready to ship. Check out InStockTrades.com for that. 2 weeks, we're going to be discussing it. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be finishing up our interview with Art Lyon. We're going to be doing some more Speeding Bullets. But before we get to that, we're going to have a mini episode. 157 is going to be a mini one. We're going to release it in a few days, probably on Friday. And it's just going to be Speeding Bullets and some listener voicemails. Some things we couldn't get in on this episode because Jim was out of town, but that we normally like to get in on the show. They're going to be from that week that he was gone. We're going to get in those Speeding Bullets and listener voicemails and have them on there. Then we'll be back with episode 158. A few days later, it'll be early next week's show. That's going to be part 2 of this, and more Speeding Bullets and more chat like that with Jim and myself talking about some of the current releases that are out there, some big things that are coming. And then we have some special episodes that are planned down the road, including Batman the Long Halloween, but we have some segments and some guests are going to be joining us, including a couple of segments that I'd like to get together on Booster Gold. So that's one of the characters that we really want to talk in depth about and kind of get into the head of Booster Gold. So some big things coming up in Raging Bullets, and thank you guys for your patience this week, and hope you enjoyed this episode.
Bye. Alrighty, and we are now joined by Ken Petrelli. You're with the New Rochelle Library, correct?
Yes.
And you do something really cool, because we have a lot of people talk about how they'll go to their libraries, they pick up the trades, and it's kind of like a nice way to save on money. If there's like titles out there that you can't afford to get, you can go to your library. And you have a cool job in that you get to buy the books for the library.
Yeah, absolutely. I get to spend other people's money on comic books.
Nice. Now, oh God, that's like what a lot of people right now are thinking, man, that'd be a dream job. Now, how did you get into this? How do you find that kind of job?
Well, let's see. This is a long, weird story, but I'll try and cut it short.
We love long, weird stories here, so feel free. Have fun with it, man.
I'm actually a musician. My bachelor's degree and my first master's degree are both in music. I went to library school to be a music librarian. But the first job I took while I was in library school was for New York Public Library in the city. And I should quantify, I'm the teen services librarian, so most of my job is I work with teenagers. And I just kind of fell into that while I was working in the city and found out I loved it. I love hanging out with the kids, and it's a job where I do not in any way have to grow up.
Nice. Now okay, that's a fun thing right there. You don't have to grow up. You get to have fun, hanging out with kids. That's a cool job, Sean, who normally would be sitting here, who's right now off at the Battle for the Cowl panel, he's also he's a teacher, so he gets to have that interacting with the kids and all that type of cool stuff there.
Oh yeah, keeps you on your toes. I'm never bored.
Oh, I can imagine. Now, with the sales and the buying it, now, do they have like limits on what you can get? Is there like, get this type of genre, or do they have like the open-ended saying, hey, you know what the kids want, go out and get it?
I mean, I do, we call it collection development, and I do all collection development for young adults in the library. So I have a budget, and I work with my budget, and so much of that goes into buying graphic novels and manga, and it's, we're a pretty big library. I have a pretty big budget, so I probably have the largest collection of graphic novels and manga in the county, which would be Westchester County in New York. And I circulate probably well over 100 titles per month, so it takes up a good chunk of my budget money, but it's worth it because I get the return on it. So
that's kind of cool. Now, have you ever run into any problems where you wanted to pick up something oh no, you can't do that, because there's a lot of graphic novels out there that I could see people who don't know enough about comics being worried about them. First off, that of course pops in my head is Watchmen, because it's very adult oriented comic. I can see people say, oh no, watch that,
Watchmen is in my teen section. So is all the Sandman stuff. I'll go pretty edgy. I'm about as staunchly anti-censorship as you can imagine, and I don't censor myself when I'm buying. I trust the kids to know what they're reading and to understand things, and in my experience, a teenager, if they're not ready for something, they're just going to close the book and put it down anyway. I do also collect graphic novels for the adult section, and there are points where you get to... It's not even so much edgy stuff as sometimes there are certain authors who write stuff that's adult. The same way we would look at a novel and say, Ian McEwan, Joyce Carol Oates, these are people who write books for adults. There are authors in the comic book world that write stuff for adults too, and so I have things in both places. And I have adults who come up to the teen area who are looking for their comics, and we'll have kids who, the older teens who look for stuff downstairs in adults. So
cool, man. Now, what about the Johnny DC line? With where it's the all age appropriate stuff. Where I'm honestly reading a lot of that stuff and enjoying it as an adult. So
it depends on the title, because of course the children's room also has graphic novels too. So a lot of the stuff aimed at younger kids may be down there, but depending on the title, if it's something that's going to appeal to anybody, it might appeal to teens, might appeal to adults, I'll put it in my teen area. I might stick it in adult too. Why not?
Cool, man. That's that's kind of a cool thing there, where you get to do this and bring this to people, because it's comic book comics are a fun, wonderful hobby, but they can be an expensive hobby, and it can hurt sometimes a lot, especially people. You got to we're looking at tough tough economic times where money's a little bit tight. Public libraries are a great way to continue up with this with our passion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our circulation all across the board for everything over the past year has gone up roughly 27%, and that's everything. That includes all my stuff. And I mean, we're in a pretty urban area, and a lot of the kids I work with, they can't afford to buy this stuff, the tons of stuff, especially my little psychotic manga readers, and stuff that's serialized like that, and they'll just take whole series out, over and over again. And
oh yeah, and manga is just getting huge. It's one of those things that's just growing. I got my nieces, just are eating that stuff up, and they absolutely love that. And I'm saying they're loving it as if I'm not reading it too. I'm into the anime and all that stuff, and I started picking up some manga stuff, and I'm like, it's it's the same but a little different. It's that little quirkiness that it's specialized for that.
And kids today, the kids who are teenagers right now, these are kids who've grown up. They were watching Pokemon when they were 4. They were watching Dragon Ball Z when they were 8. And they've literally grown up with sequential art, with anime, all of this stuff as just a basic part of their lives. And it's making graphic novels, comics, manga, all of that just part of the mainstream. So, of course, it has to be part of our collections now, because it's something almost everybody now is reading. When you've got graphic novels winning major literary awards, you had American Born Chinese win the Michael Prince, you had Fun Home win the Lambda Award, you had all these great books winning major awards. It brings it more into a mainstream consciousness, and it becomes more important that I have it in my collection.
Oh, nice, man. Yeah, it's kind of cool seeing just the growth and evolution of, if even not even just the manga stuff, but everything, how it is a natural, it encourages reading, and it's something that's kind of a cool thing there.
And as anybody who knows your educational stuff, a lot of attention is paid now in education to Gardner's theories of multiple intelligence, and to understand both picture and text at the same time actually takes more work than just reading. So that old saw that comic books were what, dumb kids read, that's out the freaking window. And it's most of my smarter kids, my type A's, who are the really serious, hardcore comic book readers. And, not that we haven't always known that, but now everybody else is understanding it too.
We have proof that, see, we were the smart kids. But now, do you get requests from people, from either teachers, from parents, from kids? Hey, can you get this type of stuff? Does that kind of stuff come through?
Mostly from the kids. They will drive what I buy always. It's their section, not mine. So I'm buying for them. So whatever they're going to tell me to get. Usually when I have money to add stuff, or I can add a couple more manga series, I can buy more graphic novels. I'll have them vote on what they want me to add. Yeah, absolutely. It's the reader who drives what I do, so it's always up to them.
Oh, cool. Now, one thing I know, Sean's brought some his trades into his classrooms, and the kids just dive on them and eat them up. But he says one thing that always gets them, because they're kids, they're reading it. So in the process of reading it, it breaks down a little bit. Are you finding that you're having problems with keeping this stuff in pieces, in a solid piece on the shelf? Are you replacing a lot of stuff? And what is this thing you've bought? I bought 12 copies of this thing already, or something like that.
Yeah, but that's the way it goes. Some stuff, the more popular it is, the more it goes out, and then I can think of specific titles. I mean, Jeff Smith's Bone, I've had to replace those I don't know how many times. The Sandman books I've had to replace I don't know how many times, because they just go out until they fall apart.
Oh,
cool. But we like that.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, yeah, I know, that's a good thing. If you got to replace something, that means they're reading it and they're enjoying it, and they're attacking it with a passion. So that's a definite good thing. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, anything else you want to throw out there? I'm shooting from the hip here.
No, I mean that's about it. Comic books. I mean, when I started my job 7 years ago, there were no comic books. I was trying to build teen services from scratch, and I started buying graphic novels. And my director at the time, the head of the library, who has since retired, and she was old school, and it was like, comic books? In the library?
Yeah.
And all I had to do was hand her the search statistics and say, yeah, but look how much they go out. She looked and she said, excellent, buy more.
Nice.
But the more and more that it's become an ignored part of library services, not only comic books, but on alternate Wednesdays, I have an anime and manga club. I have a gamers club. All of this pop culture stuff is such part of these kids' lives, then it's part of what I do with them. And,
that
is
is
awesome.
That is really cool. That it's not just the reading; it's you're opening up and you're expanding it out there. Because you think about it, especially with the gamer stuff. I can see a lot of people don't like their kids doing the gaming. They want to keep them away from it.
I don't care.
I know, and you're bringing it. It's getting them.
I can dump 10 tons of research on those people that will show that gaming is actually good for you. That these kids are smart kids. That they may be learning and thinking in a way that was different than you did before, but it's not a bad thing. And you come to my gamers club, and people always tell me, it's so non-social. Bullshit. It's completely social. And I've got kids from all different schools all hanging out and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And jamming on Smash Brothers. It's great.
Oh, cool, man.
It's interaction, and it's what they need as they're growing up.
And it's a positive interaction.
Absolutely.
Is what I like saying, because one of the things you get a lot with people talk about the gang mentality, where it's they're banding together, but they're not banding for positive stuff. It's not the Boy Scouts of America anymore. It's there's some bad stuff going on here, and here we're seeing a nice way to bring people together for fun and just that nice interaction. Giving them an alternative to destruction. It's a growth and a positive thing. So that's outstanding. Outstanding, my friend.
Cool.
Well, thank you for being on the show, and thanks for doing what you do, man. That's a cool thing. It's, we want to see more of this type of stuff expand out there. So the more positive programs that are out there, it'll breed in other places as well.
Absolutely. It's, gaming, comics, anime is all becoming big stuff in libraries, and I couldn't be happier. So
cool.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.